Hey guys, tonight we're going to travel back to a time and place that's not quite as romantic as the storybooks make it seem. Forget knights in shining armor and damsels in distress. Tonight, you're just a regular man in medieval Europe and you've got her. It's a story where your reputation, your property, and your entire future hinge on something incredibly private becoming incredibly public. And trust me, surviving the gossip might be harder than surviving the plague. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, let me know in the comments what city you're listening from and what time it is for you. I love seeing how far these stories travel. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. The first thing you notice is the cold. It's not the biting cold of winter, but a specific, personal coldness that radiates from the other side of the bed. You're lying on a straw-stuffed mattress, the coarse linen sheet doing a poor job of feeling soft against your skin. Outside, the world is silent, save for the occasional creak of the house, settling or the distant, lonely bark of a dog. Inside this room, the silence is heavier. It's a silence filled with unspoken accusations. Your wife is lying next to you, but she might as well be in another country. Her back is turned to you, a rigid, unyielding wall of spine and shoulder. You can't see her face, but you don't need to. You've seen the expression enough during daylight hours, a tight-lipped mixture of disappointment, frustration, and something that looks dangerously like contempt. The space between you on the mattress feels like a vast, icy chasm. It's been months. Months since you've shared more than a few terse words about the price of grain or a leaky roof. Months since there has been any warmth, any touch that was accidental and quickly withdrawn. This marriage, arranged so carefully by your families to merge into modest parcels of land and create a respectable union, has failed to produce its most important fruit and heir. And in this world, a marriage, without the promise of children, is like a field that won't grow crops. It's barren. It's pointless. You think about the promises made. The priest had spoken of the debitum conjugale, the marital debt. A strange way to think about intimacy as a transaction, a duty to be fulfilled. It's a debt you owe each other, a holy obligation to be fruitful and multiply. But right now, your account is deeply, deeply in the red. Every night feels like a test, and every night you fail. The more certain that failure becomes. You know the pressure isn't just on you. Your wife carries the weight of her family's expectations. Her mother, a woman with a stare that could curdle milk, probably asks her every market day if there's news. Her friends, all of them with toddlers clinging to their skirts or another pregnancy swelling their bellies, exchange knowing, pitying glances when she walks by. Her value, her very identity in this small, tightly knit community, is tied to her ability to be a mother. Lying in the dark, you wonder what she's thinking. What are her options? Divorce, as you understand it, is nearly impossible, a privilege for kings and the highest nobility. But you've heard whispers, stories told in hushed tones by men over cheap ale, of another way out. An annulment, a declaration that the marriage never truly existed in the eyes of God. But on what grounds? Historians still debate just how much a woman in your wife's position would have known about her legal options, or how empowered she would have felt to use them. Was it a common threat whispered between unhappy wives, or a terrifying, rarely used legal bazooka? You suspect you're about to find out. The thought sends another chill through you, one that has nothing to do with the temperature of the room. You listen to her breathing, steady, controlled, and utterly separate from your own. The storm has been brewing for a long time, the clouds gathering overhead. Tonight, you feel a shift in the air. The pressure has changed. Suddenly, the rustle of linen breaks the silence. She sits up, a dark silhouette against the faint moonlight filtering through the shutters. She doesn't look at you. She swings her legs over the side of the bed, her bare feet making a soft, deliberate sound on the cold wooden floorboards. She reaches for her simple woolen robe, pulls it on, and walks to the door. It opens with a low groan of wood on iron, and then clicks shut behind her, leaving you alone in the oppressive darkness, with nothing but the echo of her departure and the profound, sinking feeling of dread. The cold side of the bed just got a whole lot colder. You don't sleep. Or if you do, it's a fitful, shallow state of consciousness, punctuated by the phantom sound of the door latch clicking. But she doesn't return. When the first weak, grey light of dawn seeps through the cracks in the wooden shutters, the other side of the bed is still a cold, empty expanse of wrinkled linen. The air in the house is stale with yesterday's dread. You force yourself to move. The simple act of sitting up feels like lifting a millstone. You pull on your rough spun tunic and leggings, your fingers clumsy and slow. Every familiar object in the small room, the wooden chest holding your few possessions, the clay water jug, the simple crucifix on the wall seems alien, as if you're re-seeing it for the first time, or the last. There's no fire in the hearth, no smell of porridge or baking bread. The house isn't just empty of her presence, it's empty of life. You can't stay here. The silence is too loud. Pushing the heavy door open, you step out into the crisp morning air. The street is already beginning to stir. A baker's boy hurries past with a basket of loaves on his head, leaving a warm, comforting trail of scent in his wake. Two women are at the public well, their voices a low murmur as they hoist a bucket. As you pass, they don't look at you directly, but you feel their gaze slide over you and then quickly away. Or maybe you're imagining it. Paranoia is a weed that grows fast in the soil of shame. You don't know where you're going. To her parents' house. The thought makes your stomach clench. Facing her father, a man whose handshake felt like a promise of land and lineage, is a prospect more terrifying than facing a wolf. So you just walk, your feet taking you towards the center of the town, towards the marketplace and the church, as if the anonymous bustle of the crowd can offer some sort of shield. But you don't get that far. A figure detaches itself from the shadow of the church portico. It's Father Thomas, the parish priest. A cheek as a stern, lean man, whose piety is matched only by his belief in rigid order. He doesn't smile. He beckons to you with a slight, deliberate nod of his head. "A word, my son," he says, his voice even undevoid of warmth. He leads you not into the church, but to a small stone bench in its shadow, away from the main path. He waits for you to sit before he speaks, his hands clasped in front of him. "Your wife Maria came to see me late last night," he begins, his eyes fixed on some distant point over your shoulder. "She was not alone, she was accompanied by her mother and 2 other matrons of the parish." This is the first blow. It wasn't a private, desperate plea. It was a planned, public delegation. She brought witnesses. A strange and chillingly formal detail of these proceedings was that a woman couldn't simply make the accusation alone. She often had to be backed by other reputable women who could attest to her character and the apparent childless, unconsummated state of her marriage. They were a chorus to her aria of complaint. "She has made a formal complaint," Father Thomas continues, his voice dropping slightly. "A grave one. She has petitioned the bishop's court, the ecclesiastical court, for an annulment of your marriage." The words hang in the air between you. Ecclesiastical court. Not the local lord's justice, not a matter of property theft or a drunken brawl. This is a matter for the church. Because marriage isn't a contract of land or money, it's a sacrament. A holy bond. And only the church can declare that such a bond was never truly formed in the first place. On what grounds? You ask, though you already know the answer. The words feel like gravel in your mouth. Father Thomas finally looks at you, his gaze sharp and penetrating. She claims the marriage has not been consummated. She claims that you have failed to render the debitum conjugal. The Latin phrase sounds even more damning coming from his lips. The marital debt. She claims, he says, leaning in almost imperceptibly, that you are afflicted it is that you are impotent and incapable of the act required to make a marriage valid in the eyes of God. There it is. The accusation, laid bare in the cold morning light. The private, agonizing shame of the bedroom has just been given a legal name and filed as a formal case. Your personal failure is now a matter of canon law. You want to shout, deny it, to say she's lying. But what can you say? You can't prove a negative. And the central, damning fact remains: she is not with child. The marriage is, by all outward appearances, barren. Historians still argue passionately about the motivations of women in these cases. Was your wife's action a genuine cry of despair from a woman trapped in a loveless, fruitless union, desperate for the chance at a family under meaningful life? Or was it, as sometimes happened, a calculated legal maneuver, a way to escape a marriage she was unhappy with for other reasons, be they financial, personal, or the desire for another man? There was no fault divorce. This was the only escape hatch available, and to open it, she had to pull a lever that would publicly humiliate you. The summons will be delivered from the diocesan office in a few days' time, the priest says, standing up. He has delivered his message. His duty is done. I suggest you pray, my son. Pray for wisdom. And for strength. He turns and walks back towards the church, his black robes blending into the shadows of the stone archway. You remain on the bench, frozen. The sounds of the town, the chatter, the hammering of a distant blacksmith, the laughter of children all seem to fade into a dull roar. The world, which just a few moments ago felt vast and indifferent, has suddenly shrunk to the size of a courtroom. And you are about to be placed directly in its center. The next few days pass in a blur of surreal, suspended animation. You move through your daily routines on instinct alone, a ghost in your own life. You feed the chickens. You mend a broken fence post, you go to the market. But you're not really there. You're floating, watching yourself perform these mundane tasks from a great distance. Every interaction is laced with a new, sickening layer of self-consciousness. When you haggle with the grain merchant, you wonder if he knows. Does the slight hesitation in his eye mean something? When the blacksmith's wife gives you a sharp, appraising look, is she picturing the scene in the ecclesiastical court? The town has become a hall of mirrors, each face reflecting a distorted version of your own shame. You start taking the long way round, down back alleys and deserted paths, just to avoid the possibility of eye contact. You're haunted by the priest's words. The summons will be delivered. It feels like waiting for a sentence to be carried out. You see shadows in your peripheral vision and flinch, thinking it's the courier. Every knock on the door sends a jolt of ice through your veins. The knock finally comes late one afternoon. It's not a polite tap, it's a firm, authoritative rap of knuckles on wood that brooks no argument. Your heart hammers against your ribs. You open the door, and there he is. H.E.S. not a grand official in silken robes, but a simple, dull-looking man on a tired-looking horse, a leather satchel slung over his shoulder. H.E.S. a functionary, a cog in the great legal machine of the church, but today he is the most imposing man in the world. He doesn't need to ask for your name. The entire street has gone silent. Windows that were empty moments before now have faces pressed against the glass. The two women from the well are standing by their doorway, arms crossed, their expressions a mixture of pity and morbid curiosity. This is not a private delivery. It's a public performance. I am a summoner from the court of the bishop, he announces, his voice loud enough for the whole street to hear. He pulls a rolled parchment from his satchel. It's tied with a ribbon and sealed with a dollop of intimidating red wax, stamped with the bishop's insignia. I bear a summons for you to appear before the ecclesiastical court. He holds it out to you. Your hand trembles as you take it. The parchment feels heavy, weighted with the power of the institution it represents. He doesn't leave immediately. He stays there, mounted on his horse, a silent observer, ensuring that the full spectacle of your humiliation is witnessed by all. You are being officially marked, publicly branded. This public delivery was an intentional part of the process. It wasn't about administrative convenience, it was a demonstration of the church's authority. It made the privates in a public matter from the very outset and put immense social pressure on you, the accused. It was a clear signal to everyone the sacred institution of marriage has been violated, and the church's marriage has been violated. You finally break his gaze and look down at the scroll in your hand. You unroll it. The Latin is dense and full of legal jargon you barely understand, but some words leap out at you. Stark and brutal causa matrimonial is accusatio impotent iae cor am judici ibus matrimonial case accusation of impotence before the judges. It names the date 2 weeks from now. And it names the place, the diocesan court in the nearby cathedral city. You look up from the parchment, and the summoner is still there watching you. He gives a slow, deliberate nod as if to say, my job here is done. Then he turns his horse and carteres away down the street, leaving a thick, ringing silence in his wake. You retreat back inside your house, the scroll clutched in your fist. The door feels flimsy, offering no protection at all. The eyes of the entire town are burning holes through the wood. You sink onto a stool, the parchment spread out on the rough-hewn table. This piece of paper is a portal to another world. A world of canon lawyers, of theological arguments, of arcane rules and procedures you know nothing about. You are a farmer, a craftsman, a man of the earth. What hope do you have in their world of words and ink? A particularly bizarre tidbit from history comes to mind, a story you once heard told by a traveling friar. He spoke of a case where a man, accused just as you are, was so terrified of the summoner that he hid in his own hayloft for 3 days. The summoner, a patient man, simply waited in the yard, occasionally calling out the man's name and the nature of his summons, until hunger and shame forced him to come down. The story seemed funny at the time. You realize with a sickening lurch that this summons isn't just a request for your presence. It's a command. To ignore it would be to defy the bishop himself, to commit an act of contempt against the church. That would be a far worse crime, one that could lead to excommunication. There is no running. There is no hiding. The path has been laid out for you, and it leads directly to the courtroom. You stare at the red wax seal, a stark symbol of the power that has just reached into your quiet life and turned it upside down. You are no longer just a husband, a neighbor, a man. You are now the respondent in a case of impotence. And your trial has already begun, right here on this street, in the eyes of everyone you know. In the 2 weeks that follow, you live in a state of quiet panic, trying desperately to understand the monstrous legal machine that is about to grind you up. The summons isn't just a date and time, it's an indictment. And to have any hope of defending yourself, you need to understand the charges. This means seeking counsel. Your first stop naturally is Father Thomas, but his advice is more spiritual than practical. He speaks of penitence, of accepting God's will, of the sanctity of the sacrament. He can explain the theology, but not the legal loopholes. He is a shepherd, not a lawyer. He tells you what you should do for your soul, not what you can do in a courtroom. Your only other option is a man in the nearby market town, a notary. Yes, not a trained canon lawyer, not one of the elite advocates who practice in the high courts, but he can read and write and has a passing familiarity with legal documents. Yes, a man who makes a living from the cracks in the system. You find him in a dusty, cramped office tucked behind a tannery, the air thick with the smells of curing leather and old parchment. He is a small, weasel-like man with ink-stained fingers and eyes that dart around as if constantly looking for an angle. You show him the summons. He reads it, his thin lips moving silently, and a flicker of something professional interest, perhaps even relish, crosses his face. This is not a simple land dispute. This is a juicy, complicated, human drama, and that means a bigger fee. He says, tapping a stained finger on the parchment. An impotence trial. Causa frigidit, at is a delicate matter. He leans back, stapling his fingers. The burden of proof, you see, is on your wife. She and her witnesses must establish a triennial cohabitation. That is, you have lived together as man and wife for 3 years, and yet the marriage remains, unfulfilled. 3 years. That was the standard, a bizarrely specific waiting period established by canon law. The logic, as he explains it, was that this provided ample time for any temporary issue, shyness, illness, even a temporary curse to resolve itself. If after 3 years of trying, nothing had happened, the church could be reasonably sure the problem was permanent. Some historians argue this 3-year rule was actually a compassionate, if clumsy, attempt to prevent hasty annulments and give a couple every chance to succeed. For you, it just feels like a countdown to doom. But we've only been married for 18 months, you protest, a small seed of hope sprouting in your chest. The notary gives you a pitying smile. The 3-year rule is the standard, yes. But it is not absolute. It can be waived. If the court is persuaded by other evidence, what other evidence? He leans forward, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. The inspectio corporis, a physical inspection. Of you, he lets the words sink in. And if they find what they call permanent and perpetual impediments, then the 3 years are not necessary. The court can proceed directly. You feel the blood drain from your face. A physical inspection. By whom? They can't. Just look at me. Oh, they can, he says almost cheerfully. The court will appoint a panel. Surgeons, senior clerics, sometimes a physician if one can be found. They will examine you to see if you are properly formed, if you possess the necessary equipment for the task, and if it appears to be in working order. He pauses. It is, I'm told, quite thorough. This is where the law moves from abstract terror to concrete bodily horror. This wasn't just about testimony. It was about your physical body becoming Exhibit A. You picture yourself standing before a panel of grim-faced old men, your deepest physical vulnerability laid bare for their clinical, dispassionate judgment. And it gets worse. He explains the bizarre legal theories that underpin these examinations. The court wasn't just looking for obvious physical defects. They were operating on a set of medieval medical beliefs that are, to modern eyes, completely absurd. They believed impotence could be caused by an excess of cold or moisture in the body, a lack of vital heat. The man's virility was tied to his humoral balance. One bizarre, though unverified, story tells of a panel of experts who once declared a man impotent simply because they thought his nose was too small and cold, believing it to be an indicator of a generative warmth in his body. Whether true or not, it speaks to the strange pseudoscience that could decide your fate. And what if they find nothing wrong? You ask, your voice barely a whisper. Then your wife's case is weaker but not lost, the notary says, ticking off points on his fingers. She can still argue for non-consummation. She can bring her septima manus witnesses. Septima manus. The seventh hand, he translates. It's an oath-taking ceremony. She will bring 7 people, friends, family, reputable neighbors who will swear on a holy relic that they believe her testimony. That they believe the marriage has not been consummated. It's a character reference, a way of bolstering her claim. The notary shakes his head. It's very persuasive to the judges. So, it's your word against hers. And she has a chorus of 7 voices backing her up, all swearing on the Bible. The scales of justice feel impossibly weighted against you. You are one man, alone, stripped of your dignity, your privacy invaded, standing against your wife, her family, her friends, and the full, crushing weight of canon law. You pay the notary his fee, a significant chunk of your savings. You leave his office feeling not enlightened but terrified. He has given you a map of the battlefield, but every path on it seems to lead to your own defeat. The abstract dread of the summons has now crystallized into a series of concrete, terrifying procedures. You now know exactly what is coming. And it is far, far worse than you could have ever imagined. Leaving the notary's office, you don't head straight home. The thought of that silent, empty house is unbearable. Instead, you find your feet carrying you to the one place where a man's misery can find an anonymous company, the marketplace. But the anonymity you crave is gone. The market square is a living, breathing creature. It's a riot of sound, smell, and color. Chickens squawk in their cages, merchants shout their prices. The air is thick with the scent of spices, livestock, and unwashed humanity. Normally, you find a certain comfort in this chaos. It's the vibrant, beating heart of your community. Today, it feels like a stage, and you are the unwilling actor in a morality play. As you walk through the crowded square, you feel a change in the atmosphere around you, like the air parting before you. Conversations that were animated a moment before fall to a low murmur as you approach. People suddenly find themselves intensely interested in a bolt of cloth or a pile of turnips. No one meets your eye. This is the real, immediate consequence of the summons. The legal battle is in 2 weeks. The social trial has already delivered its verdict. You are guilty until proven innocent, and even then, the stain will never truly wash away. You see a group of men you share Dale with, help raise a barn for standing near the cooper's stall. One of them catches your eye, and for a second, you see a flicker of sympathy, but then he is nudged by his companion, a man with a cruel smirk, and he turns away, his back suddenly rigid. The circle closes. The women are worse. They watch you with a mixture of contempt and a strange, clinical curiosity. Their whispers are like the rustle of dry leaves, just loud enough for you to catch snippets. The one whose wife can't give her a child. Shameful. You see your wife smother across the square, talking to two other matrons. She doesn't look at you, but her posture is one of righteous indignation. She is the mother of the wronged party, a figure of public sympathy. You are the villain of the story, the man who failed in his most fundamental duty. Shame is a physical thing. It's a heat that rises in your neck, a weight that presses down on your shoulders. You find yourself hutchmig, trying to make yourself smaller, less conspicuous. But it's no use. Your notoriety makes you a giant. One of the more peculiar historical aspects of these trials is how they turned a man's perceived sexual failing into a public spectacle that invited commentary from everyone. It wasn't just a legal matter, it became a piece of community entertainment, a source of gossip as potent as any scandal involving the local lord. Your virility, or lack thereof, was now a legitimate topic of public discourse. You duck into an alley to catch your breath, leaning against the cold stone wall. You can still hear the noise of the market, but it's muffled, distant. In this moment of solitude, the full weight of your isolation crashes down on you. Your wife is gone, your friends have turned away, your community has judged you. Who can you turn to? The legal system of the time had a strange duality. While the ecclesiastical court was preparing to dissect the most intimate details of your life, the common law, the law of the local lord, was mostly indifferent to your plight. Impotence wasn't a crime in the secular sense. You hadn't broken the king's peace. This was a matter of society, which is why the church had jurisdiction. This is a point historians often stress. The crime you were accused of was not against society, but against God's law for the institution of marriage. It created a bizarre situation where you could be a respected craftsman one day and a social pariah the next, without ever having committed an act that would interest the local sheriff. Suddenly, a voice cuts through your misery. Tough day at the market, eh? You look up. It's an old man, a weaver you vaguely recognize, sitting on an upturned barrel in the alley, chewing on a piece of straw. His eyes are surprisingly sharp and clear. They're a pack of vultures, aren't they? He says, not unkindly, pecking at any weakness they see. You don't respond, just stare at him, surprised that anyone is speaking to you at all. I saw the summoner, he continues, spitting out the piece of straw. My brother's wife's cousin. He went through the same thing. 20 years ago it was. You are suddenly alert. Here is something other than condemnation or pity. Here is a flicker of shared experience. What happened, you ask, your voice hoarse. The old weaver shrugs. He lost the dowry land she brought with her. Lost his name. He pauses, looking at you intently. They made him, you know, stand before the priests, the whole thing. He shakes his head slowly. He left town. Never saw him again. Couldn't bear the shame. The story hits you like a physical blow. This isn't just a legal proceeding, it's a social execution. The outcome is exile, one way or another. But the old man adds, leaning forward slightly, I heard something else. I heard he married again in the north, had 3 sons, big, strapping lads. This is the part that confounds you, the part that historians still debate. What did these verdicts actually mean? The court could declare you impotent quo ad henc, meaning in respect to this one woman. It was a legal acknowledgement that, for whatever reason, be it physical incompatibility, psychological aversion, or even witchcraft specifically targeting your relationship with this one woman, you were incapable of consummating this marriage. It didn't necessarily mean you were impotent with all women. It was a bizarrely specific ruling, a legal loophole that allowed a man to be declared incapable, lose his wife and property, and yet potentially go on to have a perfectly functional marital life with someone else. It was a way for the court to dissolve a failed marriage without logically precluding a man's future prospects, a distinction that was likely lost on the gossiping public. The old weaver story offers a tiny, paradoxical sliver of hope. It suggests that this hell might not be permanent, but it also confirms your deepest fear to get to that future. You first have to be utterly destroyed in the present. You have to lose everything. You thank the old man, your voice thick with emotion. He just gives a slight nod and goes back to watching the alley. As you step back out into the market square, the noise and the stairs haven't changed, but something inside you has shifted. The shame is still there, hot and heavy, but now it's mixed with a cold, hard kernel of something else resolve. You may be destined to lose, but you will not simply crumble. You will face the court. The day of the hearing arrives with a grim grey dawn. You've travelled to the cathedral city, a journey of cheaping where you spoke to no one and no one spoke to you. The city is a daunting place, a labyrinth of stone streets overshadowed by the colossal form of the cathedral. Its spires seem to scratch at the heavens, a constant, silent reminder of the power you are about to face. The ecclesiastical court is not held in the main body of the cathedral with its soaring ceilings and stained glass saints. It's in a side chapel, a stark, cold room with stone walls, a vaulted ceiling that echoes every shuffle of a foot, and high, narrow windows that let in a grudging, judgmental light. There are no decorations, no finery. This is a place of business, God's business. You are not the only one here. There are others waiting on the hard wooden benches, a merchant accused of usury, a woman accused of witchcraft, a priest accused of fathering a child. Their faces are all masks of anxiety, a small, miserable fraternity of souls caught in the church's legal net. You sit apart from them, an island of your own specific shame. Then she arrives. Your wife, Maria, she is not alone. She walks in flanked by her mother and father, their faces set like stone. Behind them are several other women from your village, the ones the notary called the Septima Manus her chorus. They look at you not with hatred, but with a kind of righteous certainty, as if they are performing a necessary, if unpleasant duty. Maria herself doesn't look at you. She keeps her eyes fixed on the crucifix at the front of the room, her expression pious and sorrowful. She is playing the part of the wronged wife to perfection. The judges enter. There are 3 of them, to senior canons from the cathedral, their faces lined with the dry wisdom of legal texts, and the bishop's vicar general, the man in charge. They are not lords or warriors, their power lies in their intellect, their knowledge of the law, and the immense moral authority they represent. They take their seats behind a long, heavy oak table, their clerks arranging stacks of parchment and inkwells before them. The vicar general, a man with a surprisingly soft voice that fills the entire room, calls your case. Your name echoes off the stone walls. You are directed to stand in the center of the room. Maria is directed to stand opposite you. The space between you, once the intimate space of a marriage bed, is now a legal battlefield, a no man's land. The proceedings begin, all in Latin. A clerk reads the formal accusation in a rapid, monotonous drone. Even though you only catch a few words, impotent I non consummatum nullit, at mot reumani, the meaning is crushingly clear. Then the vicar general turns to your wife. Speak, my daughter, he says in the common tongue, his voice gentle. Tell the court why you have brought this petition, and she does. In a low, steady voice, she tells the story of your marriage. She speaks of your courtship, the wedding, the setting up of your home. She paints a picture of a hopeful beginning. Then her voice begins to falter, strategically. She speaks of the lonely nights, of her prayers for a child, of her growing despair. She never raises her voice. She never raises her voice. She never sounds heartbroken. It is a masterful performance. And in all this time, the vicar general asks, his eyes on her, in the 18 months you have lived under one roof as man and wife, has your husband ever known you in the biblical sense? Has the marriage been consummated? Maria pauses. She takes a breath. She finally, for the first time, looks directly at you. Her eyes are not filled with the contempt you expected, but with a cold, clear certainty. No, your grace, she says, her voice ringing with conviction. Never. The word hangs in the air, absolute and damning. Now it's your turn. The vicar general's gaze shifts to you. It is not unkind, but it is heavy, expectant. And what say you to this accusation? Do you deny your wife's testimony? This is the moment to fight back. I do deny it, you say, your voice louder and stronger than you expected. She is not telling the truth. The marriage has been consummated. I have fulfilled my duties as a husband. A murmur ripples through the room. Maria's father glares at you with pure venom. You have just called his daughter a liar in front of God and his representatives. This is a critical juncture in the trial. By denying the non-consummation, you escalate the conflict significantly. You could have taken another route. Some men, in a desperate attempt to save face, would admit to the non-consummation but blame it on external factors. The most common of these, and one the court took surprisingly seriously, was the claim of witchcraft. A man could claim he was the victim of a malefic, a specific curse, often a ligature or not magic, that prevented him from performing his marital duty. Historians debate whether the men who used this defense actually believed it, or if it was simply the most plausible, least emasculation excuse available. By not claiming witchcraft, by simply stating it happened, you are setting up a direct, she said confrontation, a far more difficult case to win. The Vicar General seems to consider your statement, his fingers tapping softly on the table. You claim the union was sealed. Your wife claims it was not. We have here a contradiction at the very heart of the sacrament. He looks from you to her and back again. The truth must be found. He then explains the next step. Since you deny the core of her claim, the court must seek further proof. First, they will hear from her witnesses. Then they will proceed to the step the notary had warned you about, the step you had been dreading more than any other. Therefore, the Vicar General announces, his voice echoing in the silent room, this court orders a physical inspection of the respondent, to be conducted by qualified surgeons and midwives, to seek any physical impediment that might prevent the consummation of this sacred bond. He turns to a clerk. Let the witnesses be called. Maria is led to a bench. Her part in this stage is over. She has planted the seed of doubt. Now others will water it. As you stand there, alone in the center of the room, you feel a cold dread wash over you. The legal arguments are over for now. The trial is about to become painfully, horribly physical. The first of her witnesses, a grim-faced woman you recognize as her aunt, is already moving towards the front, ready to swear on a Bible and tear your world apart, one gossipy story at a time. The first witness to be called is your wife's aunt, a woman whose sour expression seems to be a permanent feature. She places her hand on a heavy, leather-bound Bible presented by a clerk, and swears to tell the truth, so help her God. Her eyes, small and sharp, flick towards you for a moment, full of grim satisfaction. Tell the court what you know of this marriage, the Vicar General instructs. Her testimony, and that of the women who follow her, is a masterclass in rumor presented as fact. They don't claim to have been in the bedroom with you, of course. That would be absurd. Instead, they build a circumstantial case, brick by brick, painting a vivid picture of a non-existent marital life. This is the Septima Manis in action, not just as a formal oath, but as a narrative force. The aunt speaks first. I have known my niece Maria since she was a babe in arms. She is a good, pious, healthy girl. I have visited her home many times since the wedding. She pauses for dramatic effect. The house, it feels wrong. There is no joy in it. It is cold. To people living as strangers, not as man and wife. It's all insinuation. How do you cross-examine a feeling? How do you argue against the coldness of a house? The next witness is a neighbor, a woman whose yard borders yours. Their bed sheets, she says, leaning forward conspiratorially. I have spoken with the girl who helps Maria with her washing. The sheets are never soiled, as one would expect from a newly married couple. This detail, so intimate and so demeaning, hangs in the air. The court, composed entirely of celibate men, listens with serious, scholarly expressions. They are not interested in the salaciousness of it, they are seeking evidence, and in their world, this counted. The state of your laundry has just become a key piece of evidence in a canonical court case. Historians find these details fascinating, as they show how the private, domestic sphere of women laundry, cleaning, daily chores could be weaponized and brought into the formal, male-dominated legal arena. Another woman, one of Maria's childhood friends, testifies next. Maria has not blossomed as a wife should, she says, dabbing at a dry eye with a handkerchief. She is still as slender as the day she was wed. There has been no sign of a happy union, no swelling of the belly, no whispered news of a coming child. We, her friends, have all been blessed, but she remains barren. The narrative is powerful. You are not just being accused of a single failing, you are being painted as the source of your wife's unhappiness, the obstacle to her natural, God-given purpose. Your alleged impotence is transformed into an act of passive cruelty. When all the witnesses have spoken, their stories weaving together into a tight tapestry of your guilt, the Vicar General looks at you. Do you wish to question these witnesses? What could you possibly ask? Did you really have a conversation about my bed sheets? How can you testify to the joy level of my house? To even ask the questions would be to give their absurd claims more dignity than they deserve, yet to stay silent feels like an admission of guilt. They are lying, you say, your voice tight, or they are seeing what my wife has told them to see. The Vicar General gives a slight nod, as if he expected this response. The testimony of the Septima Manus was not considered irrefutable proof, but it was highly influential. Its purpose was to establish what Canon lawyers called fama publica, public repute. If the community at large believed the marriage was unconsummated, it lent significant weight to the primary accusation. The court was, in essence, taking a poll of public opinion. The debate among historians on this point is lively. Was the use of fama publica a pragmatic tool for judges dealing with a lack of concrete evidence in, he said? Or was it a deeply flawed system that essentially institutionalized gossip and allowed personal vendettas to be settled under the guise of legal procedure? Could a man ever truly win a case against the combined weight of his wife's testimony and the public repute of an entire community? The odds were certainly stacked against him. Having established the public narrative, the court now moves to the private. The Vicar General dismisses the witnesses. The doors of the chapel are closed, leaving only you, the judges, the clerks, and to other men who have been waiting silently at the back of the room. One is a surgeon barber, a man more used to pulling teeth and letting blood, and to this kind of work. The other is a senior-looking cleric, his face impassive. It is time for the inspectio corporis, the Vicar General announces. You will remove your clothing. The moment you have been dreading is here. Your heart pounds in your ears. The room, which felt cold before, is now icy. This isn't a medical examination in any modern sense. There is no privacy, no sense of patient care. It is a legal ritual. You slowly, reluctantly begin to remove your tunic, your leggings. Your hands feel clumsy, disconnected from your body. You are intensely aware of the eyes on you, the clinical, detached gaze of the judges, the professional curiosity of the surgeon. You are no longer a person, you are an object, a piece of evidence to be scrutinized. As you stand there, exposed and vulnerable in the chilly room, the surgeon approaches. He carries no instruments. His tools are his hands and his eyes. He is about to perform the most intimate, humiliating examination imaginable, his findings to be announced publicly unrecorded for the court record. You close your eyes, bracing yourself for what comes next, a man reduced to the sum of his parts, his fate resting on the judgment of strangers in a cold, stone room. The surgeon barber is a professional, his manner brisk and impersonal. This is a job, a strange job to be sure, but a job nonetheless. He circles you slowly, his eyes taking in your physical form. He is not looking for signs of health or strength in a general sense. He is looking for specific, legally defined impediment. Walk to the wall and back, he commands, his voice flat. You obey. Your bare feet cold on the stone floor. Every step feels awkward and self-conscious. HES watching your gait, looking for any sign of deformity or weakness in your legs and hips that might, according to the medical theories of the day, affect your ability to perform the marital act. Then comes the direct examination. It is as humiliating as you imagined, a clinical, hands-on assessment of your private parts. The surgeon is methodical, checking for what the legal texts described as defects of nature. He is looking for anything that might suggest you are improperly made for the purpose of generation. His touch is detached, but it feels like a brand. You stare at a crack in the stone wall opposite you, focusing on it with all your might, trying to mentally remove yourself from the room, from your own body. This process, the inspectio corporis, is one of the most well-documented and controversial aspects of impotence trials. The records from these cases are often incredibly explicit, detailing with almost surgical precision what the examiners were looking for and what they found. They operated under a framework that seems bizarre to us. For example, they believed that testicles of equal size were a sign of fertility, while significant asymmetry could be an indicator of a problem. This wasn't based on any real scientific understanding, but on ancient theories passed down from Greek and Roman physicians like Canon. So the surgeon is not just looking, he is comparing, assessing you against a flawed, ancient ideal. After a few minutes that feel like an eternity, the surgeon steps back. He confers in a low whisper with the senior cleric who has been observing silently. The cleric nods. The surgeon then turns to the judge's table. "I have completed the examination," he announces to the court. "The man is formed as other men are. I find no outward visible or palpable sign of a natural impediment. His members are of a sufficient and proper size. There is no defect in the structure." A wave of relief washes over you, so powerful it almost makes your knees buckle. It's the first piece of good news you've had in weeks. You have passed the first, most basic test. You are, physically at least, normal. But your relief is short-lived. The Vicar General, who has been watching the entire process with an unreadable expression, now leans forward. The surgeon finds no natural defect, he says, his voice filling the room. But this does not conclude the matter. An inability to perform the act is not always a matter of form, but of function. And with that, the trial descends into a new level of absurdity. Because if the hardware is fine, the problem must be with the software. The court must now determine if you are capable of, for lack of a better term, operating the machinery. This is where the second part of the inspection begins, a part even more invasive than the first. It's a test of arousal. The court needed to know if you were capable of what they term direction under mission. And how do they test that? By bringing in another panel of experts. The Vicar General nods to the clerk, who opens the chapel door. Two women enter. They are not young like your wife. They are older, matronly figures. Their faces are stern, businesslike. They are midwives, or perhaps just respected matrons of the community known for their experience in such matters. They are the female counterparts to the surgeon, a popomama pinshantuang or gaggle of matrons, as samurai historians have called them, whose job it was to provide a hands-on assessment. The court calls upon these good wives, the Vicar General intones, to assist in determining the respondent's functional capacity. Their task, was outlined in numerous historical court records, was to attempt to manually stimulate the accused man to see if a physical response could be produced. This is perhaps the single most bizarre and humiliating element of the entire process. You, the accused husband, are now expected to become aroused on command, in a cold stone room, under the scrutinizing gaze of 3 judges and a cleric, or being handled by the stern-faced older women to whom you are a complete stranger. The sheer psychological impossibility of the task is staggering. The anxiety, the shame, the terrifying high-stakes nature of the situation, it's the most anti-aphrodisiac environment imaginable. Yet, this was a standard procedure in many impotence trials across medieval and early modern Europe. The 2 women approach you. You are frozen, trapped in a nightmare from which there is no waking. Your mind is screaming, but you are silent. Your reputation, your future, your entire identity as a man is about to be decided by the outcome of this forced, clinical, and utterly grotesque performance. The question that still perplexes historians is, did anyone ever pass this test? The records are ambiguous. Given the circumstances, failure seems almost inevitable. Was the test designed to be failed? Was it a form of ritualized humiliation, a way for the court to confirm what it already suspected by putting the accused in an impossible situation? Or did the judges genuinely believe this was a valid and scientific method for getting to the truth? The answer is likely lost to time, a casualty of a worldview so different from our own. As the 2 women stand before you, their faces grim and determined, you feel the last of your composure begin to crack. The surgeon's examination was about your body. This is about something deeper. This is a trial of your very essence, your virility, in the most literal and terrifying way possible. And you know with a sickening certainty that it is a test you are destined to fail. The 2 matrons are not gentle. Their touch is not meant to be sensuous or comforting. It is purely functional, like a farmer checking a goat for breeding. Their hands are rough from a lifetime of work, and their approach is entirely devoid of warmth or delicacy. They get to work, their movements practiced and impersonal. You stand there, a statue of mortification. The world narrows to the feeling of their hands, the cold air on your skin, the hard floor beneath your feet, and the 5 pairs of eyes watching your every involuntary flinch. The judges, the cleric, the surgeon, they all observe with the detached interest of scholars examining a strange insect. This is not about passion or desire, it is a clinical experiment. You try to disconnect your mind from your body, to retreat to some safe internal fortress. You think of anything else: the price of wool, the leak in your roof, the pattern of cracks on the ceiling. But the physical reality of the situation is inescapable. The shame is a physical presence, a suffocating blanket that smothers any possibility of a natural response. And of course, nothing happens. Your body, under this immense pressure and public scrutiny, remains stubbornly, resolutely unresponsive. The very anxiety about failing ensures failure. It is a perfect, cruel loop. The minutes stretch into an eternity. The silence in the room is absolute, broken only by the rustling of the women's clothes and the sound of your own frantic, shallow breathing. The matrons exchange a look. It's a look of finality, of a task completed and a result obtained. They have done their part. They step back, wiping their hands on their aprons as if they've just finished kneading dough. One of them, the elder of the two, turns to the judges. She doesn't need to speak. She just gives a slight, almost imperceptible shake of her head. It's a simple gesture, but it's a verdict. The Vicar General nods slowly. The court thanks you for your service, good wives. You may leave. As they exit the room, you are left standing alone again, the chilling evidence of your failure hanging in the air more palpably than any spoken testimony. You have failed the test. You have been publicly, officially, and professionally proven to be unresponsive. Let the respondent be clothed, the Vicar General commands. You pull on your clothes with trembling, fumbling fingers. The rough fabric of your tunic has never felt so comforting, a fragile shield against the world's gaze. You are no longer an object of inspection, but a man again, a broken, humiliated man. This strange reliance on female testers is a fascinating, if disturbing, historical footnote. Why them? The logic seems to have been that these experienced matrons, often midwives, possessed a practical, worldly knowledge of the male body that the celibate male clerics and even many physicians lacked. They were considered the empirical experts in the messy, physical realities of procreation, while the priests were experts in its theology. It represents a bizarre intersection of folk wisdom and canonical law, where the expertise of the village midwife was given official standing in a court of law. The judges now confer among themselves in low, rumbling Latin. You can't understand the words, but you can guess the content. They are discussing the evidence, your wife's testimony, the corroboration of her witnesses, the surgeon's report that found no physical defect, and now the damning result of the practical test. The debate among historians is whether this test was the definitive factor, or just one piece of a larger puzzle. Some argue that by this stage, the judges had often already made up their minds based on the testimony and the former publicant. The physical examinations were more of a formality, a ritual to confirm the inevitable verdict. Others contend that the judges took this empirical evidence very seriously, and that a successful response, however unlikely, could have genuinely turned the case around. The truth probably lies somewhere in between, varying from court to court and judge to judge. The Vicar General finally raises his head. He looks at you, and for the first time, you think you see a flicker of something beyond judicial impassivity. Pity, perhaps, or is it just weariness? He has seen this sad, human drama play out many times before. The evidence presented thus far, he says, his voice echoing in the chapel, is compelling. The testimony of your wife, supported by her oath-takers, establishes a strong presumption of non-consummation. The physical inspection has revealed no natural impediment, yet the practical test of your functional capacity has failed. He lets the word hang in the air, failed. However, he continues, and your head snaps up. This court is an instrument of God's justice, but also of His mercy. It is possible that your failure is a product of the circumstances, of shame, of fear. These are powerful forces that can confound even a healthy man. A tiny, impossible spark of hope ignites within you. Is He giving you an out? It is also possible, he goes on, his eyes narrowing slightly, that your inability is not general but specific. That it is a condition that afflicts you only in the presence of your lawful wife, an enchantment perhaps, or a psychological aversion. The law provides for this possibility. He is offering you a lifeline. A strange, humiliating lifeline, but a lifeline nonetheless. You are about to be introduced to one of the most desperate and bizarre appeals processes ever conceived. It is a last-ditch effort to prove your manhood, a final, public performance that will either redeem you or seal your fate forever. The Vicar General steeples his fingers, his expression one of solemn contemplation. The law, he explains slowly, as if lecturing a student, is not merely an instrument of judgment, but a tool for discovering truth, and the truth of the marital sacrament is paramount. He begins to speak of theology, of the writings of Augustine and Aquinas. He talks about the three great goods of marriage: prose, fides et sacramentum, offspring, fidelity, and the sacred bond itself. Your personal, agonizing problem is now being framed as a grand theological puzzle. A marriage to be valid in the eyes of God, he intones, requires not just consent, but the potentiaco undi, the capacity for the marital act. Without this capacity, the sacrament is frustrated. It is a seed that cannot sprout. The Church must therefore be certain, for to uphold a false one is to trap the souls in a state of perpetual incompletion. You stand there, listening to your life being debated in abstract terms. It's surreal. You are the central subject, yet you feel completely incidental to the conversation. This isn't about you and Maria anymore. It's about a point of law, a principle of faith. The Vicar General continues, the Holy Scriptures tell us that the husband should give to his wife her due, and likewise the wife to her husband. This is the debitum conjugal, the marital debt. He makes it sound so simple, like a financial transaction. You owe a debt, and you have defaulted. The court is the collection agency. It's a strangely cold and legalistic way to view the most intimate of human connections, but it was the core of the Church's entire legal framework for marriage. Marriage was a contract, and consummation was the act that sealed it, making it legally binding and indissoluble. This is where the debate among historians gets particularly interesting. Was this legalistic view of marriage, this focus on debt and duty, a reflection of how ordinary people actually experience their relationships? Or was it a purely intellectual construct, created by celibate male clerics who could only understand marriage in transcational, non-emotional terms? Some scholars argue that for many people, especially in arranged marriages, this contractual understanding was perfectly normal. The romantic ideal of a marriage based on love and affection was a later development. For you, standing in this courtroom, it just feels like the sacred has been made brutally profane. The judge now turns his attention to the more esoteric aspects of your case. We have ruled out a natural physical impediment, he says, glancing at the surgeon. We must now consider the possibility of an unnatural one, a malefic, witchcraft. He is officially opening the door for you to use the one excuse that might save you from the full shame of the verdict. There are those who, through bargains with the devil, can cast spells and create enchantments, he explains, his voice serious. They can tie knots in a cord while a wedding ceremony is proceeding, and by so doing, tie up the groom so that he is unable to perform his duty with his wife. This was the infamous ligature, or not magic. It was a widely held belief, so common that it was discussed in detail in theological texts like the Malleus Maleficum. It was considered a very real and very serious threat. The court's willingness to entertain this as a legitimate defense is a window into the medieval mindset, where the supernatural was not a matter of superstition, but a tangible force that could directly impact daily life. Such a curse, the judge continues, is often specific. It may render a man impotent with his wife, but not with other women. It is a targeted attack on the sacrament itself. He is giving you the script. He is telling you what to say. He is offering you a narrative that shifts the blame from your body to an external evil force. You wouldn't be a failure, you would be a victim. You look over at Maria. Her face is a mask of pious neutrality. What does she think of all this? Does she believe you are cursed? Or is this just part of the legal game she has to play to get her freedom? The judge's next words lay out the path forward. If you believe yourself to be the victim of such a curse, you may formally state it now. The court would then be obliged to investigate. We would search for the instruments of such a curse: a knotted cord, a wax effigy, a hidden charm. The implications are terrifying. An accusation of witchcraft is a dangerous thing. It could lead to a whole new investigation, one that might ensnare someone else, an old woman in the village who looked at you funny, a rival for your wife's affections. A witch hunt is a fire that, once lit, is very hard to control. So I ask you now, the Vicar General says, his eyes locking onto yours. Do you wish to make such a claim? Do you believe you have been bewitched? You are at a crossroads. One path leads to a verdict of simple personal failure. The other leads into the dark, paranoid world of witchcraft accusations. You have to make a choice. You can accept the shame of being impotent, or you can unleash a far more dangerous and unpredictable force into your community. Your mind races. What is the truth? Are you just unable, or has something or someone done this to you? The line between psychological anxiety and the belief in an external curse is, in this moment, terrifyingly thin. The court waits for your answer. All eyes in the room are on you. The judges, the clerks, even the stone saints carved into the chapel walls seem to be waiting for your answer. The silence is immense. The Vicar General has handed you a narrative, a potential escape route, paved with superstition and fear. Are you bewitched? You open your mouth to speak, but no words come out. The thought is tempting. To blame a curse would be to reclaim some sliver of your manhood. It wasn't you who failed, it was an evil force acting upon you. You see it in the eyes of the judges, they are ready to believe it. It's a tidy explanation that fits neatly into their worldview. But then you think of the consequences. You think of old Elspeth, the woman who lives at the edge of the village, the one who sells herbal remedies and is rumored to have the evil eye. You think of the whispers and accusations that would fly, the fear that would poison your community. You would be saved from one kind of shame only to be responsible for a far greater darkness. And at a deeper level, it feels like a lie. A convenient lie, a socially acceptable lie, but a lie nonetheless. The problem, you know in your gut, is not a knotted cord hidden in a chimney. It's here, inside your own head. The fear, the pressure, the humiliation that is the real curse. No, you say, your voice surprisingly firm. I do not believe I am bewitched. A collective, almost inaudible sigh seems to pass through the room. You have rejected the easy answer. You have closed the door on the supernatural explanation. The Vicar General raises an eyebrow, a flicker of surprise on his face. He offered you a way out, and you refused to take it. Historians who study these cases are often fascinated by the men who, like you, refused to play the witchcraft card. Was it a matter of principle, a lack of imagination, or a pragmatic fear that a witchcraft accusation could spiral out of control and ultimately harm the accuser as much as the accused? It's a choice that speaks volumes about an individual's character and their assessment of risk. Very well, the Vicar General says, his tone shifting. The offer of mercy has been rescinded. Now it's back to the cold, hard facts of the case. You deny the claim of non-consummation. You do not claim witchcraft. You present the court with a simple contradiction, your word against your wife's. And the evidence thus far, he adds, his gaze heavy, does not favor your position. You feel a surge of desperation. You have to say something. Do something. Do something. She is lying, you blurt out. This is not about a child. She is unhappy. Her family was disappointed with the dowry. This is an excuse to end the marriage. You are accusing her of perjury, of manipulating the holy court for personal gain. It's a serious counter-accusation. Maria's father, sitting in the front row, leaps to his feet. Liar, you shame my daughter and now you slander her. Silence. The Vicar General barks, his soft voice suddenly turning to iron. The man sits down, sputtering with rage. The judge turns his cold eyes back to you. You make a grave accusation. Do you have any proof of this? Any witnesses who can attest to your wife's discontent or her family's greed? And there it is. The core of your problem. You have no proof. It's just a feeling, a suspicion born of cold shoulders and tight-lipped silences. Your evidence is the absence of warmth, the chill in your own home. Who can testify to that? The very people who could, her friends, her family, are the ones sitting on the other side of the room, testifying against you. You are utterly, completely alone. No, you admit, your voice dropping. I have no proof, only what I know. What you know, without evidence, is not admissible in this court, the judge says flatly. We deal in testimony, in oaths, and in the physical evidence we have gathered here today. This is your defense, and it is crumbling to dust. You have one card left to play, a desperate wild swing. It's her, you say, pointing a trembling finger at your wife for the first time. Perhaps the problem lies with her. Has she been inspected? How do you know she is capable? This was a known, if risky, defense strategy. Impotent, I.a. expart failure is or impotence on the part of the woman. A man could accuse his wife of having a physical condition that made consummation impossible. It was a classic I know you are, but what am I defense? The Vicar General's expression turns to stone. We are not here to question the wife's capacity. She has come to the court with a legitimate petition, supported by witnesses. You are the respondent. The focus of this inquiry is on you and the claims made against you. In most cases, the court was highly reluctant to allow such a counter-accusation, viewing it as a desperate and dishonorable tactic to deflect blame, unless the man had compelling, pre-existing evidence of a problem on his wife's part. It was usually dismissed out of hand. You have failed. Your denials, your accusations, your desperate deflections, they have all shattered against the unyielding wall of canon law. You have no witnesses, no evidence, and you have just been publicly proven to be non-functional under clinical observation. You look at Maria. She is sitting perfectly still, her hands folded in her lap, the very picture of wronged virtue. She is winning, and you have helped her every step of the way. You stand in the center of the cold chapel, the silence thick with your failure. You've denied witchcraft, your counter-accusations have been dismissed, and your credibility is in tatters. The Vicar General looks down at his notes, then back at you, his face a mask of judicial gravity. It feels like the end, but it isn't. The medieval legal mind, particularly in matters of faith and sacrament, had a penchant for complexity and a deep-seated reluctance to close any door definitively if a sliver of doubt remained. The judge's next words flew from the world of straightforward, if humiliating, legal procedure into something far stranger. You have rejected the explanation of malefic, IUM in the general sense, the Vicar General says slowly. But we must be thorough. The devil is cunning, and his methods are varied. He leans forward slightly. There is a specific form of enchantment, a curse well documented by learned men. It is not a simple knot that binds a man's generative power entirely. Rather, it is a targeted curse. A malefic IUM quod hanged, a bewitchment that affects a man only in relation to this specific woman. This is a new, terrifyingly specific twist. It's not that you're impotent with her, it's a concept that seems almost designed to explain away the inexplicable, to find a supernatural cause for what might simply be psychological aversion, incompatibility, or simple, human anxiety. To the medieval mind, this made perfect sense. A demon, wishing to destroy a holy marriage, wouldn't bother with a blanket curse. It would attack the union at its most vulnerable point. Such a curse, the judge continues, his voice taking on the quality of a scholarly lecture, can be cast by a jealous rival, a spurned lover, or anyone who wishes ill upon this sacred union. It can make a man who is virile with all other women completely incapable with his own wife. The flesh is willing, but the spirit and the physical members are supernaturally thwarted. He is once again offering you an out. But this one is different. It's not a general claim of being cursed, which you've already denied. It's a highly specific diagnosis of a spiritual ailment. To accept this narrative would be to admit that something is fundamentally, uniquely wrong with your relationship with Maria, something so broken that it has attracted the attention of demonic forces. This legal concept, the impossibility with respect to this one, is a source of endless fascination for historians. It created a legal framework for what we might now call psychological impotence. Was the court genuinely concerned with demonic intervention, Or was this a sophisticated, if superstitious, way of acknowledging that some couples were just fundamentally incompatible without having to invent the modern concept of irreconcilable differences? It allowed them to dissolve the marriage on the grounds of this unique, targeted curse, while leaving the door open for both parties to marry others successfully. We must consider this possibility, the Vicar General declares. For if you are the victim of such a specific enchantment, then you are not truly impotent in the eyes of God, and the marriage is not necessarily void. It is merely obstructed. The implication is dizzying. If you're just obstructed, then maybe the obstruction can be removed. The court now shifts from a legal body to something more like a spiritual hospital. The next step is not to hear more testimony, but to find the source of the curse. The instruments of such a curse must be sought, the judge announces. A knotted cord or wax effigy, a charm buried under the threshold of your home or sewn into the mattress of your marriage bed. He turns to a clerk. I am dispatching a notice to the priest in the respondent's home parish. He will conduct a thorough search of the marital home and its grounds. He will be assisted by two trustworthy parishioners. Your home, your private space, the place you shared with Maria, is about to be turned upside down and searched for instruments of black magic. Your neighbors, people you've known your whole life, will be rooting through your possessions, looking under your floorboards, sifting through the ashes of your hearth, all in a hunt for demonic paraphernalia. A particularly bizarre historical account, which may or may not be apocryphal, tells of a search that found a cursed toad buried in a leather pouch under a couple's hot sign. The toad was seen as the source of the husband's inability, and its discovery and subsequent ritual destruction was enough for the court to believe the curse had been lifted. Whether the toad was a genuine folk magic curse or conveniently discovered by a wife eager for an annulment is, of course, the real question. Furthermore, the judge says, turning his attention back to you, you must yourself engage in prayer and fasting. You will seek the aid of your patron saint. You will make a pilgrimage to a local shrine. You are to take all spiritual measures to combat this potential affliction. You are being given a set of tasks, the spiritual quest. Your trial is no longer a passive experience. You are now an active participant in your own spiritual battle. It's a bewildering turn of events. Just moments ago, you were on the verge of being declared a complete failure. Now you are being recast as a spiritual warrior, fighting against the forces of darkness. As the judge finishes his instructions, you feel a strange sense of unreality. The court has taken the mundane misery of your unconsummated marriage and elevated it into a cosmic struggle between good and evil. Your personal shame has become a matter for exorcists and holy relics. You are to go home and wait while your priest ransacs your house for cursed toads and knotted strings. The legal process has officially gone off the rails and into the shadowy realm of demonology. You return to your village a changed man. Before, you were the subject of gossip and pity. Now you are something far more strange and unsettling, a man potentially touched by witchcraft. The news of the court's decision has traveled faster than you. The priest, Father Thomas, received the bishop's directive and acted upon it with grim efficiency. Your house is no longer your own. When you arrive, the door is ajar. Inside, a scene of quiet chaos awaits you. Father Thomas is there, along with the blacksmith and the village miller, two men chosen for their piety and standing in the community. They are not being destructive, but they are being thorough. Your mattress has been sliced open, the straw stuffing pulled out and sifted through. The cold ashes have been raked out of the hearth. A floorboard in the corner has been pried up. They are hunting for demons in your dust. We act under the authority of the bishop's court, Father Thomas says, his voice devoid of apology. He holds up a small, knotted piece of leather thong they found attaching near the chimney. What is the meaning of this? You stare at it. It's a piece of scrap. Something a bird might have used for a nest, or a bit of old harness that broke off. It means nothing. But in the paranoid atmosphere of the witch hunt, every mundane object becomes a potential clue. It's nothing, you say, your voice flat. The blacksmith and the miller exchange a look. They are not bad men. You've known them your whole life. But they are caught up in the drama. Their face is a mixture of fear, suspicion, and a kind of holy excitement. They are on a mission from God, rooting out evil from their midst. This is the reality of a malefic, IUM investigation. It turns a community against itself. It makes neighbors suspicious of trinkets and shadows. Historians point out that these searches often reveal more about the anxieties of the community than about any actual witchcraft. A poor harvest, a sick cow, and an impotent husband could all be rolled into one grand conspiracy, with a single cursed object serving as the explanation for everything. The desire for a simple answer to complex problems is a powerful human motivator. They find nothing else. No wax figures, no pouches of strange herbs, no buried animal bones. The search is a failure. Father Thomas seems almost disappointed. A clear sign of witchcraft would have been a tidy, understandable conclusion. The absence of evidence just leaves an uncomfortable ambiguity. After they leave, you are left alone in the wreckage of your home. You slowly begin to put things back in order. You stuff the straw back into the mattress sticking. You replace the floorboard. You sweep the ashes back into the hearth. But the house feels violated, contaminated by suspicion. Every shadow in the corner seems to hold a secret. The court's decision has put you in an impossible position. By entertaining the idea of a targeted curse, they have turned your private life into a public spectacle of the most bizarre kind. You are now expected to perform your piety, to be seen praying, fasting, and seeking divine intervention. Your spiritual life, like your sexual life, is no longer your own. It's a performance for the benefit of the court and the community. You think about the strangest part of this whole affair, the specificity of the alleged curse. It only affects you with Maria. This leads to a chillingly logical, yet utterly insane, question: if the curse is specific to her, would you be functional with someone else? The thought is both terrifying and, in a dark way, intriguing. It is the central question that the court, in its strange wisdom, is now forcing you to confront. One of the most peculiar and debated historical elements of these trials is how a court might test for a malefic. IUM quod hanc. If a man was cursed only with his wife, the logical way to prove it would be to see if he was capable with another woman. But how could a holy court possibly sanction such a sinful act? It was a legal and moral paradox, and yet the records hint at extraordinary, almost unbelievable solution. The court would not, of course, order you to go sleep with a random woman. That would be a mortal sin. But they could, and sometimes did, resort to a final, desperate, and profoundly strange measure. It was a last-ditch effort to get to the truth, a last-chance appeal for the accused husband. It was a test that moved the trial out of the courtroom and the marital bedroom, and into an entirely new, and even more public arena. As you lie there in your violated home, a new kind of dread begins to dawn. You thought the physical inspection by the matrons was the lowest point. You were wrong. You have a sickening premonition that the court's quest for truth is not over. They have exhausted the possibilities of the courtroom and the church. There is one place left for them to look for an answer, a place of public commerce and private sin. The thought is so wild, so contrary to everything the church stands for, that you try to dismiss it, but the idea, once planted, takes root. The court, in its bizarre and relentless logic, might just be crazy enough to do it. Weeks turn into a month. You live in a state of limbo. The search of your house yielded nothing. Your prayers feel hollow, and the pitying, suspicious stares of your neighbors are a constant, grating presence. You are trapped, waiting for the court to make its next move. Finally, another summons arrives. This time, you know the way to the cathedral city, and the journey feels less like a trip to your execution and more like a weary return to a place of inevitable suffering. The court reconvenes in the same cold chapel. The three judges are there, their faces as impassive as ever. Maria is there, flanked by her family. Her expression is one of patient, pious suffering. She is playing the long game, and she is winning. The Vicar General summarizes the case so far. The petition for annulment stands, he begins, his voice echoing slightly. The testimony of the wife and her witnesses suggests non-consummation. The physical inspection of the respondent found him to be, in form, a capable man. However, the practical test of his function proved a failure. A subsequent investigation for general malefic IUM has yielded no evidence. He pauses, looking directly at you. We are left with the final possibility we discussed: a targeted enchantment. A curse that renders the respondent incapable with his wife, and with his wife alone. He lets that hang in the air. This is a difficult matter to prove. The devil is a liar, and his works are shrouded in deceit. How can this court know for certain if such a specific curse is at play? This is the critical question. How do you prove a negative? How do you prove you're not impotent with all other women? The respondent, the judge continues, claims he is a capable man. He claims the marriage was consummated. His wife denies this. His own body has failed to support his claim under the court's direct observation. We have reached an impasse. You can feel the trap closing. Every avenue has led to a dead end. However, the judge says, and that word once again sends a jolt through you, Canon law in its wisdom provides for one final, extraordinary measure, a test to be used only in the most intractable of cases. It is a controversial measure, one the court employs with great reluctance. But our duty is to the truth of the sacrament. He looks from you to Maria, then back to you. The court therefore decrees a congress us quam testibus, a congress before witnesses. A wave of shocked murmurs ripples through the small public gallery. Maria's mother gasps, her hand flying to her mouth. Even Maria's stoic expression finally cracks, a flicker of disbelief in her eyes. This is the nuclear option. This is the ultimate, most humiliating, and most desperate procedure in the entire arsenal of canon law. The judge explains the terms, his voice cold and clinical. You and your wife will be taken to a room prepared for the purpose. You will be observed by a panel of court-appointed experts. And you will be instructed to attempt to consummate the marriage. It's the test of the matrons, but 1,000 times worse. This isn't a clinical stimulation. This is a common performance of the marital act itself with your wife in a bed, under the watchful eyes of a jury. This is not a spectacle for the curious. The judge adds sternly, glancing at the gallery. The witnesses will be learned men and women of unimpeachable character. A priest, a surgeon, and a panel of senior midwives. Their purpose is not to pry, but to bear witness to the truth. The historical reality of the Congress is one of the most debated aspects of these trials. It seems so unbelievably bizarre and cruel that some early historians thought the accounts must be exaggerated or fabricated. But the legal texts are clear. It was a real, if rare, procedure, used in particularly difficult cases in some parts of Europe, most notably in France, from the 16th to the 17th century. Its justification was that it was the only possible way to get definitive, observable proof in a, he said, she said, case of non-consummation. It was the ultimate attempt to make the invisible visible. You will be given a set time, the judge continues. If within that time, you are able to perform your duty and render the marital debt, and the midwives can confirm the signs of a true consummation, then your wife's petition will be denied. The marriage will be declared valid and binding. If you fail, he leaves the consequences unspoken. They are obvious. You look at Maria. Her face is pale. She is as much a victim in this as you are. To get her freedom, she must submit to this ultimate degradation, performing the most intimate act of her life in front of a panel of strangers. The law, in its blind pursuit of truth, is about to destroy you both. Does the respondent or the petitioner have any objection to this order? The judge asks, a mere formality. To object would be to admit defeat. To refuse the test is to fail the test. You are both trapped. No, your grace, you say, your voice a hollow whisper. Maria, after a long pause, shakes her head silently. So be it, the Vicar General declares. The Congress will take place tomorrow, at the hour of Vespers. He bangs a small wooden gavel on the table, the sound sealing your fate. This court is adjourned. The judges sweep out of the room. Maria is hurried away by her family, her face hidden in her hands. You are left standing alone in the middle of the room, the weight of the coming ordeal pressing down on you with a physical force. You have one last chance to save your marriage, your property, and your name. And it will be the most public, most terrifying, and most profoundly impossible performance of your life. The room is small, sparse, and suffocating. It's a chamber within the diocesan complex, set aside for just this purpose. There is a simple bed with a coarse linen sheet, a single tallow candle sputtering on a small table, and a crucifix on the wall. It feels less like a bedroom and more like a laboratory for the soul. The air is thick with the scent of old stone, candle wax, and dread, but the most terrifying feature of the room is not what's in it, but what's built into the wall. A series of small, discreetly placed holes have been drilled through the stone at eye level. They are barely noticeable in the dim light, but you know they are there. They are peepholes. On the other side of that wall, in an adjacent chamber, the witnesses are gathering. You can hear them now, the low murmur of their voices, the scrape of a bench. You know who they are, the surgeon barber who examined you, the priest Father Thomas, and a handful of the senior matrons, the experts in this grotesque theater. They are settling in for the main event. This practice of using peepholes, or sometimes a thinly veiled screen, is documented in the records of these trials. It was a concession to a sliver of decorum. The witnesses were not, in most cases, standing in the room itself, but they were present in every other sense, their unseen eyes a constant, pressing weight. It's a chilling detail that underscores the bizarre blend of forensic curiosity and feigned propriety that characterized the entire process. Then the door opens, and Maria is ushered in by her mother and one of the matrons. Her face is ashen. She is wearing a simple white night shift, and she looks small and terrified. Her eyes are fixed on the floor. Her mother whispers something to her, a mixture of encouragement and instruction, before backing out of the room. The door is closed and barred from the outside. You are alone together, and yet you have never been less alone. The silence in the room is absolute, a crushing pressure. The only sound is the frantic beating of your own heart. This is it, the culmination of months of accusation, shame, and legal maneuvering. Everything has been stripped away: the testimony, the theological arguments, the searches for witchcraft. It has all been reduced to this one, raw, biological moment. You look at Maria, the woman who was your wife. She is a stranger to you now, the other half of this horrifying equation. Is there any flicker of the affection you once shared? Any pity? Or is there only the cold determination to see this through to its conclusion? The historical debate here is poignant. What was going on in the minds of the couple during the Congress? Was it a cold, mechanical procedure? Or was there a complex storm of emotions, fear, resentment, perhaps even a desperate, last-ditch attempt to find some connection in the face of this shared nightmare? The court records are silent on the emotional reality, focusing only on the physical outcome. Maria, you whisper, the sound swallowed by the thick silence. She flinches but doesn't look up. She walks slowly to the bed and sits on the edge, her back rigid, her hands clenched in her lap. She is a prisoner just as you are. You know what you are supposed to do. You are supposed to walk over to her, to speak words of affection, to try and bridge the vast chasm that has opened between you. You are supposed to perform the role of a husband. But how? How can any intimacy bloom under the glare of this invisible audience? Every word you might say, every touch you might offer, feels rehearsed, a line in a script for the benefit of the watchers. The anxiety that has plagued you for months is now magnified 1,000. It's a stage light, hot and blinding. You think of the strangest, most pathetic detail. You heard about these proceedings sometimes. The couple would be given food and drink beforehand. Spiced wine, certain types of bread foods to be aphrodisiacs. It was a practical, almost comically naive attempt by the court to help things along, like trying to start a fire with damp wood by puffing on it. It showed their fundamental misunderstanding of the problem. They thought it was a mechanical issue that could be solved with the right fuel. Not a profound psychological breakdown. There is no spiced wine for you. There is only the sputtering candle, the silent crucifix, and the eyes in the wall. You take a step towards the bed. Then another. The floorboards creak, each sound magnified, announcing your intent to the unseen jury. You sit down next to her, leaving a careful, deliberate space between you. You can feel the tension radiating from her, a mixture of fear and resolve. You have to try, for your name, for the sliver of a future that might still be possible if you can somehow miraculously succeed. You reach out a trembling hand, intending to touch her arm, to offer some small gesture of, what? Comfort? Encouragement? But as your fingers get close, she recoils, pulling away as if from a hot iron. And in that small, sharp movement, you have your answer. There is nothing left between you. No affection, no pity, not even a shared sense of misery. There is only the legal case. She is here to prove her point, and you are the instrument of that proof. Your failure is her victory. Your success is her defeat. You are not partners in this ordeal. You are adversary. The realization is a cold, final blow. The last ember of hope, the insane thought that maybe, just maybe, you could find a way through this together, is extinguished. It is not going to happen. You know it. She knows it. And somewhere on the other side of that wall, the witnesses are taking note of the distance between you, of her recoil, of the palpable, freezing coldness in this little room of judgment. The Congress has begun. And it is already over. You sit on the edge of the bed, the gulf between you and Maria wider than the room itself. Her rejection, that small, sharp flinch, was the final word. The performance is a bust before the curtain has even truly risen. The candle flickers, casting long, dancing shadows on the stone walls. In the silence, you become acutely aware of time passing. How long have you been in here? An hour. The court had set a time limit, usually 1 or 2 hours, a horribly specific window in which to produce a miracle. The seconds tick by, each one a small nail in the coffin of your marriage. You don't try to touch her again. You don't speak. There is nothing left to say. You are two statues of misery, condemned to sit in this room until the clock runs out. The absurdity of it all washes over you in a wave of black humor. The most powerful institution on earth, the Holy Church, has decreed that the fate of your soul and your property rests on what happens in this bed in the next hour, and all you can do is sit here, paralyzed by the sheer, soul-crushing weight of the expectation. You stare at the crucifix on the wall. It offers no comfort. You feel utterly, profoundly abandoned, not just by your wife and your community, but by God Himself. This whole process, the accusations, the inspections, the search for curses, it was all supposed to be a search for truth. But it feels like a meticulously designed machine for manufacturing shame. From the other side of the wall, you hear a faint cough, a reminder. The audience is still there. They are waiting, observing your failure, recording your stillness. Your inability to even approach your wife is as damning as any physical failure. It is evidence of a complete breakdown of the marital relationship, a coldness so profound it could be felt through stone. Finally, after an eternity, there is a heavy rap on the door. The time is concluded. A voice announces from the other side. The bar is lifted. The door creaks open. One of the senior matrons enters. She doesn't look at you. Her focus is entirely on Maria. She approaches the bed, her expression a mixture of clinical duty and a strange, female solidarity. She speaks to Maria in a low voice, asking her a series of questions you can't quite hear. Then, she conducts a brief, physical check looking for the evidence of consummation that the court required. It's a swift, efficient process, a final, definitive confirmation of what everyone already knows. The matron straightens up, her face grim. She gives a single, sharp shake of her head to the priest and the surgeon, who are now standing in the doorway. It's over. You have officially, publicly, unspectacularly failed the final test. The feeling that washes over you is not the sharp sting of fresh defeat, but a dull, hollow ache. It's the feeling of inevitability, of a sentence long expected finally being read aloud. There is no more hope, and in its absence, there is a strange, empty peace. The fight is done. Maria is led from the room by the matron and her mother, who has reappeared in the doorway. She still doesn't look at you. Her part in your life is over. She has secured her evidence. She will get her annulment. She will be free. You are left alone in the room for a few moments. The bed is still neatly made, the sheets undisturbed. It's a perfect, pristine symbol of your failure. This moment of failure was the entire point of the Congress while the court presented it as a chance for the husband to prove himself. The historical consensus is that it was overwhelmingly a mechanism for confirming impotence. The psychological pressure was so immense that success was almost impossible. In the handful of documented cases where a husband claimed success, the wife often disputed it, leading to a new round if he said, she said in an invasive physical inspection of the wife. It was a no-win situation. The Congress wasn't really a test, it was a ritual of degradation, the final act in a play that could only have one conclusion. Why then did the courts use it? Some historians argue it was a form of institutional inertia, an old procedure that was kept on the books long after its utility was questioned. Others suggested a motive that it was a tool of social control, a way to publicly reinforce the importance of procreation and the dire consequences of failing to meet that expectation. It was a terrifying morality play for the public's benefit. There's a bizarre and probably apocryphal cold water theory associated with these trials. The story goes that some examiners believed that plunging a man's genitals into icy water could reveal his generative heat. If they remained cold and shrunken, he was deemed impotent. If they reacted, well, it's never quite clear what the correct reaction was, true or not. It speaks to the desperate, unscientific, and often contradictory methods used in this obsessive quest for a hidden truth. The surgeon barber enters the room to escort you back to the chapel for the final verdict. He doesn't speak to you. There's a hint of pity in his eyes, but also a professional distance. You are no longer a patient or a subject. You are just a man who has been judged. As you walk down the cold stone corridor, you feel strangely light. The weight of the last few months, the constant, grinding anxiety, has been lifted. You have hit rock bottom. There is nowhere to go but up. Or more likely, out of this city, out of your village, out of the life you once knew. The failure is completeness. There is a bitter kind of freedom. You are led back into the chapel, but it feels different this time. The air is no longer thick with tension and uncertainty. It is still settled. The outcome is known. All that remains is the formality. The judges are already seated. Marie and her family are on their bench, but their posture has changed. The anxiety is gone, replaced by a quiet, somber air of victory. They have endured the ordeal and have emerged on the other side. You are directed to stand in the now familiar spot in the center of the room. You feel a strange sense of detachment, as if you are watching this happen to someone else. The Vicar General clears his throat. He doesn't look at you. He looks at a point on the wall just above your head. The court has reconvened to deliver its judgment. He begins. The final test, the Congress os Corem test I bus has been conducted. The sworn witnesses have delivered their report. He pauses, letting the weight of the moment settle. The report confirms that the marriage has not been consummated. The respondent has failed to render the marital debt. There it is. The official final declaration of your failure. Therefore, the judge continues, his voice rising with formal authority, based on the testimony of the petitioner and her witnesses, and the conclusive evidence of the respondent's failure to overcome the impediment. This court hereby declares the marriage between this man, he gestures vaguely in your direction, and this woman, Maria, to be null and void. Null and void, the words echo in the silent chapel. It's as if your marriage, the ceremony, the vows, the 18 months of shared life have been erased from history. They never happened. The court declares that no true sacramental bond was ever formed. The petitioner Maria is therefore free from any bond of matrimony. She is returned to the state of a single woman and is free to marry another, should she so choose, in the eyes of God and the Church. Maria's mother lets out a small, quiet sob of relief. Her father puts a protective arm around her. Maria herself simply bows her head, a picture of humble gratitude. But the judgment isn't finished. It has a second part, the part that concerns you. As for the respondent, the judge says, his eyes finally meeting yours. The gaze is cold, impassive. The court finds him to be afflicted with a permanent and perpetual impediment of impotence. Therefore, he is forbidden from attempting to enter into the sacrament of marriage with any other woman, for all time. This is the final, crushing blow. You haven't just lost your wife. You have been legally and spiritually castrated. You are forbidden from ever marrying again. You are condemned to a life of solitude, branded for all to see as a man incapable of fulfilling a man's most basic role. This is where the court's earlier distinction between general impotence and a targeted curse malefic, IUM quod hand, becomes critically important, and the verdict reveals the court's true finding. Had they ruled you were merely the victim of a curse specific to Maria, you would have been free to remarry. The annulment would have dissolved the obstructed union, but left your fundamental capacity intact. But by declaring your impediment permanent and perpetual, they have slammed that door shut. They have sided with the simplest explanation: you are simply, irrevocably impotent. All the talk of witchcraft and targeted curses was just procedural diligence. In the end, they chose the most straightforward and most damning conclusion. This is a point of significant debate among legal historians. Why would a court sometimes choose the specific curse verdict and other times the permanent impotence one? The decision may have rested on the perceived character of the man, the strength of the witchcraft narrative, or even the political connections of the families involved. For some men, the bewitched verdict was a merciful, face-saving exit. For you, there is no mercy. But then the Vicar General says something that seems at first like a bizarre contradiction. However, he adds, almost as an afterthought, should God in his infinite mercy see fit to cure this affliction, the respondent may, after a period of no less than 3 years, petition this court to have this prohibition lifted. He would, of course, be required to provide irrefutable proof of his recovery. And how, you wonder, are you supposed to do that? The court has just forbidden you from marrying. The only legitimate context in which you could prove your recovery has been denied to you. It's a classic catch-22, a cruel, paradoxical loophole. This brings us to the most sordid and desperate chapter in the history of impotence trials: the appeal. Aim and declared perpetually impotent could, in some jurisdictions, attempt to have the verdict overturned. But to do so, he would have to provide proof of his virility, and how could he do that outside of marriage? The answer, sanctioned with a reluctant, pragmatic nod by some courts, was to seek the services of a prostitute. The man would have to go to a designated, licensed brothel, and his performance would have to be attested to by sworn witnesses, often the prostitutes themselves, and a court-appointed notary who would wait outside the door. It was the ultimate descent into ignominy. To reclaim your sacred right to marry, you first had to commit a mortal sin, and then have that sin officially documented and presented to the very court that represented God's law on earth. It's a perfect illustration of the messy, contradictory, and sometimes deeply hypocritical nature of the medieval legal system. The church, which condemned prostitution, was willing to use it as a tool to solve a thorny legal problem. The Vicar General bangs his gavel. The trial is over. You are no longer a husband. You are a legal nonentity, a man defined by what he cannot do. As you are escorted out of the chapel, you catch a final glimpse of Maria. She is surrounded by her family, already moving on, her future ahead of her. Your own future is a blank, empty page. The court has given you an impossible task to prove your recovery in a world that has just forbidden you from trying. Humiliating journey through the labyrinth of canon law has ended, but a new, even more desperate one is about to begin. The journey home is a solitary one. You walk the same roads you traveled with a heart full of dread, but now there's only a hollow emptiness. The verdict echoes in your mind, null and void. Permanent and perpetual, forbidden from marrying, you are a ghost, haunting the edges of your own life. When you reach your village, the news has already settled in like a thick fog. No one meets your eye. The silence that greets you is no longer one of suspicion, it is one of finality. You are no longer the man who might be impotent. You are the man who is impotent. The court of the church has made it official. Your shame is no longer an accusation, it is a legally certified fact. Your house, or what was your house, is the first casualty. The property was part of Maria's dowry. With the marriage declared null, as if it never existed, the dowry and all property associated with it reverts to her family. Her father and brothers are already there when you arrive, methodically removing her belongings: the chest with her linens, the cooking pots, the spinning wheel. They work with a silent, grim efficiency, avoiding your gaze. There is no anger, no gloating. The contract is void. The assets are being returned. You are left with nothing but the clothes on your back and the few personal tools of your trade. You have lost your wife, your home, your land, and your standing in the community. But the most significant loss is the one you carry inside you: your name, not your reputation, your identity as a man. In a world where a man's worth is measured by his ability to lead a household and produce heirs, you have been officially stamped as worthless. This stripping of assets was a brutal but logical consequence of an annulment. A marriage was an economic as well as a social and religious contract. Annulling it meant dissolving that contract entirely. This financial ruin was often a more immediate and devastating blow than the social shame. A man could, perhaps, escape the gossip by moving to a new town. But escaping poverty was another matter entirely. You find yourself wandering a vagrant in your own village. You can't stay here. Every face is a reminder. Every landmark is a monument to your failure. The only path forward is to leave. You walk away from the village without looking back, carrying nothing but a small bundle with a loaf of bread and a water skin. The road ahead is uncertain. Where will you go? What will you do? The court's paradoxical offer of a future appeal, the chance to prove your recovery, seems like a cruel joke. How could you possibly achieve that? This is the point where your story intersects with the underbelly of medieval society. The court has closed the door to legitimate society, so you are forced to seek answers in the illegitimate one. Your destination becomes the nearest large city, a place big enough to get lost in. A place with dark corners where a man's shame can be hidden, and where forbidden services can be bought. You arrive in the city, a sprawling, chaotic mass of humanity. It's a world away from your quiet village. Here, no one knows your story. The anonymity is a relief, a balm on your raw nerves. You find work as a day laborer, hauling cargo at the docks, sleeping in a cheap, flea-ridden boarding house. It's a hard, miserable existence, but it's a life. Days turn into weeks, weeks into months. The sharp sting of your humiliation begins to fade into a dull, chronic ache. But the verdict haunts you. Forbidden from marrying, the words are a brand on your soul. The desire for a family, for a wife, for a normal life, doesn't just disappear, it festers. And so, the impossible task the court set for you begins to feel less like a cruel joke and more like a desperate, long-shot gamble. You start to listen to the whispers in the taverns, the talk of the other rootless men who live on the city's margins. You learn the geography of the city since the streets where the women of the night ply their trade. This leads to one of the most poignant and ethically complex parts of your journey. To obey the court, you must first disobey God. You, a man raised to believe that fornication is a mortal sin, must now purposefully seek it out as a legal remedy. One night, with a few hoarded coins in your pocket and your heart pounding with a mixture of fear, shame, and a desperate flicker of hope, you find yourself in a dimly lit alley in the city's red light district. The air is heavy with the smell of cheap wine and despair. A woman approaches you from a shadowed doorway. The encounter is nothing like the clinical horror of the Congressus. It's a clumsy, sad, commercial transaction. There is no pressure, no expectation beyond the coin you place in her hand. There is no audience of priests and matrons, only the indifferent sounds of the city outside the thin walls of her small room. In the anonymity of this sinful act, away from the crushing weight of your past, something happens. A simple biological response that has been denied to you for so long. It is not a moment of passion or joy. It is a moment of profound, startling proof. The curse, whatever it was, anxiety, fear, the psychological weight of your failed marriage is broken. Or perhaps it was never there at all. Perhaps the problem was never you but the situation. Historians still debate the nature of psychological impotence in this era. Was it a recognized condition? Or was it always framed as a spiritual failing or a curse? The fact that the courts even had a mechanism, however sordid, for a man to prove his recovery suggests a tacit acknowledgement that the condition might not always be permanent and perpetual, that a change in circumstances could change everything. You leave the brothel and walk out into the cool night air. You should feel shame. You should feel guilt. But what you feel more than anything is a sense of vindication. A bitter, lonely, and profoundly unholy vindication. You have the answer. You have the proof the court demanded. But now comes the even more absurd part. A single, anonymous encounter is not enough. You need a notary. You need to turn this private, sinful act into a piece of public, legal evidence. Your strange quest for redemption has just entered its most bizarre and degrading phase. The single, anonymous encounter gives you a flicker of hope, But it's a useless hope unless you can capture it in a form the court will recognize. You need to replicate the proof under officially sanctioned, if still deeply sordid conditions. This means navigating a legal grey area so murky it's almost black. You return to the world of ink-stained fingers and weasel-eyed men, the notaries. You find one in the city whose reputation suggests he is not overly scrupulous. You explain your situation in hushed, shame-faced tones. You have been declared perpetually impotent, but you believe you have been cured. You need to provide the court with acta public acts to prove it. The notary listens, stroking his chin. He has heard of such cases. They are rare, scandalous, but not unheard of. It is a legal quagmire, but for the right price, he is willing to wade into it. This is a delicate business, he says, his eyes gleaming with professional interest. We cannot simply take your word for it. We need sworn testimony. We need witnesses. He lays out the grotesque procedure. You must return to a licensed, recognized brothel, not just any back alley establishment. You will hire one of the women. The notary himself, along with another credible witness, likely one of his clerks, will accompany you. They will wait outside the room. The woman you are with will then be required to come out and give a sworn statement to the notary, attesting to your virile capacity and the successful completion of the act. Her testimony, your proof, will be formally written down, sealed with the notary's official stamp, and become a legal document. The sheer, soul-crushing humiliation of it is almost beyond comprehension. To prove your fitness for the holy sacrament of marriage, you must orchestrate a performance of a mortal sin, and then have the prostitute you committed it with serve as your star witness before a court of the church. It is a perfect, diabolical circle of shame. This procedure, as bizarre as it sounds, is historically documented. It represents the medieval legal system's desperate attempt to reconcile its rigid theological principles with the messy realities of human life. The court needed irrefutable proof, and in a world without modern medical science, eyewitness testimony, or at least, earwitness testimony from outside it, always the gold standard. The fact that the witness was a prostitute was a moral complication the court was willing to overlook in its pursuit of legal certainty. It's a fascinating example of legal pragmatism trumping religious doctrine. You agree to the notary's terms and his exorbitant fee. A few nights later, the plan is put into motion. You, the notary, and his trembling young clerk walk to a large, surprisingly well-organized brothel near the city's main square. The place has an official license from the city magistrate, a fact that gives this whole sordid affair an air of legitimacy. The notary speaks with the madam, a formidable woman with a face like a well-used coin. The arrangements are made. A woman is chosen. She is young, but her eyes are old with a weary indifference. This is just another strange request in a lifetime of them. You are led to a small, shabby room. The notary and his clerk position themselves on a bench in the hallway outside the door. The notary places a fresh sheet of parchment on his lapboard, uncorks his inkwell, and sharpens his quill. He is ready to take the deposition. The door closes. You are alone with the prostitute. The air is stale with the smell of cheap perfume and resignation. The situation is even more absurd than the last time. Now you have an audience again, a legal audience, and you are expected to perform on cue. The pressure, the anxiety, the shame, it all comes rushing back. You are right back in the Congress house, but this time the setting is a brothel and the goal is to prove your virility outside of marriage. You look at the woman. She gives you a tired, professional smile. "Don't you worry, dearie," she says, her voice raspy. "I've seen men more scared than you facing a tax collector. Just try to relax." Her unexpected, workaday kindness is more disarming than any seduction could be. She is not a judge or witness in the same way she is a professional, here to do a job. Her detachment, paradoxically, lowers the stakes. This isn't about love or marriage or God. It's a business transaction. What happens next is a clumsy, hurried, and deeply sad affair, but it is, in the technical, biological sense, required successful. The proof is achieved. The woman adjusts her dress, runs a hand through her hair, and opens the door. The notary looks up, his cool poised. "Well, my dear," he asks, his voice all business. And there, in the dim, flickering light of the hallway, The prostitute gives her sworn testimony. She describes the act in frank, clinical terms, using the crude language of the street. The notary scribbles it all down, his quill scratching against the parchment. He doesn't flinch. He is a recorder of facts, not a moral judge. He asks a few clarifying questions, which she answers with a shrug. When she is done, she makes her mark at the bottom of the document. The clerk adds his own as a witness. The notary signs his name with a flourish and applies his wax seal. It is done. You have it. A legal document, an official record of your sin, which you will now present as proof of your virtue. You pay the notary, the madam, and the woman. You walk out of the brothel and into the pre-dawn chill, the rolled parchment clutched in your hand. It feels both like a trophy and a ball and chain. You have won your evidence, but you have had to descend into the deepest pit of shame to get it. Now all that's left is to return to the place where it all began, the court. It takes almost a year to get back before the court. Petitions move at the speed of bureaucracy and influence, and you have neither. You spend the year working, saving, living a Spartan life on the margins of the city, the notarized parchment your constant companion. It is your ticket to a future, a foul-smelling, shameful ticket, but the only one you have. Finally the day comes. You stand once again in the cold stone chapel. It has been nearly 3 years since your trial first began. The 3 judges are the same, perhaps a little more stooped, their faces a little more lined. The vicar general regards you with an expression of mild surprise, as if he never expected to see you again. Most men in your position simply disappeared, swallowed by the shame of the verdict. You have petitioned this court to reconsider its judgment, the vicar general says, his voice flat. You claim that the permanent and perpetual impediment has been lifted. On what grounds do you make this extraordinary claim? This is your moment. With a trembling hand, you step forward and present the notary's document. I have proof, your grace. The clerk takes the parchment and hands it to the judge. The vicar general unrolls it, his eyes scanning the dense, spittery script. A long silence fills the room as he reads. You can see his eyebrows raise almost imperceptibly. He is reading the sworn, graphic testimony of a prostitute about your virile capabilities. He passes the document to the other 2 judges. They read it, their faces unreadable masks. They confer in low, rumbling Latin whispers. You stand there, your entire future hanging on their reaction to this sordid piece of paper. This scene highlights one of the great paradoxes that historians of law and religion grapple with. How could a court of godly men accept as valid evidence a document detailing a mortal sin? The answer lies in their hierarchy of values. While fornication was a sin, the integrity of a sacrament was paramount. The court's primary duty was to ensure that sacraments were not entered into invalidly. Your initial trial was about protecting the institution of marriage from a potentially invalid union. Your appeal, therefore, had to provide proof that you were no longer a risk to that institution. The court, in its strange, pragmatic way, was willing to overlook the sinfulness of the method of proof in favor of the certainty of the evidence it provided. It was a classic case of the ends justifying the means, a piece of moral calculus that seems baffling to us today. The vicar general finally looks up. His face is stern. This document, he says, holding it out with 2 fingers as if it were a soiled rag, is highly irregular. It is an account of sin. It is testimony from a place of public vice witnessed by a notary of flexible reputation. Your heart sinks. He is going to reject it. However, he continues, it is a notarized public act. The testimony was given under oath, however questionable the witness, and it purports to describe, in explicit detail, the very capacity that this court previously found you to lack. He places the document on the table before him. The court finds itself in a difficult position. We have a previous verdict based on extensive testimony and direct observation. And now we have a subsequent document that directly contradicts that verdict. The judges confer again. You can feel the tension in the room. You have presented them with a legal and theological problem. What holds more weight? A failed performance under the holy, but stressful conditions of the Congress House, or a successful performance under the sinful, but perhaps more relaxed conditions of a brothel? A strange, unverified story from a much later French case tells of a marquis who, after being declared impotent and losing his wife, successfully appealed the verdict using this very method. When he later remarried and produced several heirs, one of his rivals quipped, "It seems his lordship's scourge is only found on the field of battle, and in the brothels of Paris." The anecdote, true or not, captures the public cynicism and mockery that often surrounded these bizarre legal turnarounds. Finally, the Vicar General renders his decision. This court cannot simply overturn its own solemn judgment based on a single, sordid document. To do so would undermine the very authority of our proceedings. "It's over. You have failed again." But he adds, "And the world stops turning. The evidence presented is sufficient to introduce a state of doubt." It suggests that the initial impediment may not have been as permanent and perpetual as this court first judged. He looks at you, his eyes hard. Therefore, the court will not overturn the previous verdict. The annulment of your first marriage stands. That is a closed matter. He picks up the parchment again. However, in light of this new evidence, the court will amend its previous sentence. The prohibition against you entering into a future marriage is hereby lifted. You can barely process the words. You have not been vindicated. Your first marriage is still gone, your name still tarnished by that initial failure. But you have been given back your future. The brand of perpetual impotence has been removed. You are a free man, the Vicar General says, his tone leaving no doubt as to his disapproval of the entire affair. You may, if you can find a woman willing to have you, attempt the sacrament of marriage again. I would advise you to spend a great deal of time in prayer and penance for the methods you have employed to achieve this end. He bangs his gavel. This case is now finally closed. You are dismissed. You stumble out of the chapel and into the sunlight, your mind reeling. You have won. It's a tainted, ugly, partial victory, but it's a victory nonetheless. You have fought the system on its own absurd terms and emerged, bruised and battered, with the one thing you wanted a chance. You have lost your first wife, and your old life, but you have been given permission to start a new one. The trial of your impotence is finally, truly over. The victory as you walk away from the court for the last time tastes like ash in your mouth. You are free, but what does that mean? The court's ruling was a masterclass in bureaucratic face-saving. They didn't admit they were wrong, they simply amended the consequences of their original judgment. The annulment of your marriage to Maria stands. It is still legally a thing that never was. This means you get nothing back. The dowry land, the house, the shared property, it all remains with Maria's family. The economic consequences of the initial verdict are permanent. You were not exonerated, you were merely uncondemned. You leave the cathedral city just as you entered it the first time with nothing but the clothes on your back and a handful of coins. The real weight of the verdict sinks in as you begin the long walk back towards. Well, you don't know where. You can't go back to your old village. The story of your appeal, of your proof from the brothel, will surely travel there eventually, adding a layer of sordid scandal to the original shame. You would be not just the man who couldn't, but the man who had to pay a prostitute to prove he could. The humiliation is complete. So you are not just a free man, you are a rootless man. You have lost your past. Your family name in that small corner of the world is ruined. Your connections, your history, your place in the web of community, all of it has been severed. This was often the unwritten final sentence of an impotence trial, regardless of the outcome of any appeal. The social damage was irreparable. The man at the center of it was often forced into a kind of internal exile, having to start over from scratch in a new place where his story was not known. You think about Maria. The annulment was her liberation. She was now free to remarry, and almost certainly would. For a woman of her standing, remaining single was not a viable option. Her purpose, as defined by her society, was to marry and produce heirs to carry on a family name and consolidate property. Her personal happiness was a secondary concern. The court, by granting the annulment, had restored her value on the marriage market. She would likely be wed again within the year, to a man her family deemed suitable. Soon she would have the children she desired, and her life would follow the path it was always meant to. Your brief, disastrous intersection with her life would become a faint, unpleasant memory. This highlights a key aspect of the trial that historians often discuss for all its cruelty to the man. The impotence trial was one of the very few legal tools a woman had to escape an unworkable or unhappy marriage. It was a high-stakes, deeply humiliating gamble, but it was a way out. Whether a woman initiated it out of a genuine desire for children, personal unhappiness, or family pressure is a question that can never be answered. But it underscores that she too was a player in a rigid system, using the few tools available to her. And what of the proof you fought so hard to obtain? The notarized document that cost you your savings and your dignity. It served its purpose and is now filed away in the dusty archives of the ecclesiastical court, a bizarre footnote in legal history, a testament to a system so obsessed with proof that its ancients sent to obtain it. There's a strange historical tidbit about the legacy of these trials. In some parts of Europe, the concept of impotence became a sort of running joke, a theme in bawdy folk tales and satirical poems. The impotent husband became a stock character, a figure of ridicule. This popular culture response shows how society often processes and mocks the things it fears. The very real, personal tragedy of men like you was transformed into public entertainment. As you walk the city fading behind you, you take stock of your situation. You are poor, alone, and carry a history of deep shame. But you are also alive. You are healthy, and you possess a strange, hard-won wisdom. You have seen the inner workings of the great machinery of law and religion, and you have survived it. You have looked into the abyss of public humiliation, and you have found a way to crawl back out. You are a blank slate. You can go anywhere, be anyone. You can learn a new trade, take a new name. The future is a terrifying, empty canvas, but it is a canvas nonetheless. The court gave you back the right to have a future. Now you have to find the courage to build one. You choose a direction at random, a road leading not towards your past, but away from it. You don't know what lies ahead. Perhaps you'll find a new life in a bustling port city, or a quiet existence in a mountain village where news from the lowlands never reaches. Perhaps you will, one day, find another woman and build the family you were denied. Or perhaps you will live out your days alone, the memory of the trial a constant, quiet companion. The sun is setting, casting long shadows across the road. For the first time in 3 years, the future is not a verdict to be handed down, but a path to be walked. Years pass. The sharp edges of your memory begin to soften. The shame, once a burning hot brand on your soul, fades to a pale, silvery scar, a part of you, but no longer the defining part. You did not return to your old life. You couldn't. Instead, you drifted, taking work where you could find it. You spent a few years in a quarry, the hard, mindless labor a welcome distraction. The rhythmic crack of the hammer on stone was a kind of therapy, chipping away at the past. Then you moved on, working as a carpenter in a growing town, your hands finding a new purpose in the clean, honest grain of wood. You learned to be quiet. You kept to yourself, a man with no history. When men in the taverns spoke of their wives and children, you would sip your ale and say nothing. When they spoke of their home villages, you would invent a vague, distant place that no one had ever heard of. But a life lived in the shadows is only half a life. The desire for connection, for a home, for a family, is a deep and stubborn root. It doesn't die just because the ground above it has been scorched. In the town where you practice your carpentry, there is a woman, a widow. Her husband, a baker, died of a fever a year ago, leaving her with a small, struggling business and 2 young children. She is not like Maria. She is not a girl with a dowry, a pawn in a game of family alliances. She is a woman who has known hardship, whose hands are dusted with flour and whose eyes are full of a quiet, weary strength. You start by making small repairs to her shop, a new shelf, a stronger door. You refuse payment at first, but she insists, paying you in fresh bread. You begin to talk, not about your past, that door remains sealed, but about the simple things, the weather, the price of flour, the antics of her children. Her children, a boy and a girl, are wary of you at first. They are used to a house without a man. But you are patient. You carve them small wooden toys, a horse, a spinning top. You show the boy how to hold a hammer. Slowly, tentatively, they begin to accept you. You find yourself falling into a new rhythm. Your work at the carpentry shop, your evenings spent helping analyze at the bakery. The sound of children's laughter. It is a life you thought you had been permanently forbidden from having. The question of your past hangs in the air between you and Annalise unspoken. She is a practical woman. She knows you are a man alone with no family to speak of. She is a widow with a business to run and children to raise. A union between you would make sense. It would be a partnership. The decision to tell her is the most terrifying thing you have done since you walked into that courtroom. One evening after the children are asleep, you sit with her at the heavy wooden table in her kitchen, the air warm and sweet with the smell of baked bread, and you tell her. You don't tell her everything. You don't mention the Congress or the brothel. The shame of those details is too raw. But you tell her the core of it. That you were once married. That the marriage was annulled by the church. That you were accused of being unable. You tell her that the court declared you impotent, and then later rescinded the final part of that judgment. You lay the skeleton of your past on the table between you. She listens silently, her hands wrapped around a clay mug. She doesn't flinch. Her eyes, which have seen death and hardship, do not fill with judgment or pity. They are simply watchful. When you are finished, the silence is heavy. You have given her every reason to turn your way. You have shown her the ugly, damaged thing at the core of your history. People say many things. She says finally, her voice quiet but firm. And courts are run by men, not by God. She looks at you, a direct, appraising gaze. I have seen you with my children. I have seen the work of your hands. I have seen the man you are now. It is the most profound act of grace you have ever experienced. She is not judging you by the verdict of a court from a lifetime ago. She is judging you by what she sees before her. This moment, this quiet conversation in a warm kitchen, is the true end of your trial. The legal proceedings were just a prelude. The real verdict is the one delivered by another human being, the one that offers not condemnation but acceptance. Historians can study the court records, the legal theories, the theological debates, but they can never capture these quiet, private moments where the real business of life happens. They can't record the conversations that rebuild a shattered identity, the small acts of trust that heal old wounds. Your story, in the official archive, ends with a legal amendment. My husband, she says, a flicker of old sadness in her eyes, was a good man. But he was not a strong one. The fever took him in 3 days. She looks down at her hands. Life is too short to be afraid of shadows from the past. She is offering you a future. A real one. Not a legal permission slip from a court, but a shared life, built on honesty and mutual need. The choice is yours. To accept is to risk everything again. To open yourself up to the possibility of love, family, and, yes, the possibility of failure. But to refuse would be to let the court's verdict, the shame of your past, win forever. It would be to remain a prisoner of your own history. You get married. It's not a grand affair like your first wedding. There is no talk of dowries or land. It's a simple ceremony in the small-town church, witnessed by a few of Annalise's friends and neighbors. The priest is a kind, elderly man who asks no questions about your past. For the first time in a long time, you feel the warmth of belonging to a community. Your new life begins. It is a life of simple, repetitive tasks that build upon each other into something solid and real. You wake before dawn, the smell of yeast and baking bread filling the house. You help Annalise with the heavy work of the bakery, kneading the dough, stoking the big brick oven. Then you go to your own workshop, a clean, sharp scent of sawdust, a welcome contrast. You spend your days crafting chairs, tables, and chests, your hands sure and steady. In the evenings you are a father. You teach the boy, little Thomas, how to use a saw, guiding his small hands. You listen as the girl, Elise, practices her letters. You eat dinner together at the big wooden table you built yourself. You listen to their stories, their squabbles, their laughter. The house is noisy, chaotic, and full of life. It is everything your first home was not, and you are a husband again. With Annalise there is no pressure, no performance, no invisible audience of judges. There is only the quiet, comfortable intimacy of two people who have found solace in each other. It is a bond forged not in the hopeful ignorance of youth, but in the shared understanding of adult hardship. Your past, the great, terrible secret that once defined you, loses its power in the face of this simple, daily reality. A dark chapter in a book that is still being written. You watch as your new wife, your analyze, moves through her days with a quiet competence. She manages the bakery, haggles with merchants, comforts a child with a scraped knee, and still finds a smile for you at the end of a long day. You realize that your first wife, Maria, was a victim of the same system that condemned you. She was a young woman trapped by the expectations of her family and society, forced to use a cruel legal weapon because it was the only one she had. You find, to your surprise, that the bitterness you held for her has faded, replaced by a distant, detached sense of pity for the girl she was. This shift in perspective is something historians often ponder. How did individuals in the past reconcile themselves to the injustices they suffered? Lacking modern concepts of therapy or social justice, they often found refuge in faith, community, or the simple, forward momentum of life. For you, healing comes not from forgetting the past, but from building a present so solid and meaningful that the past shrinks in comparison. One day, a traveling merchant passes through town, a man from the region where your old village was located. You overhear him in the tavern, mentioning names and places from your former life. You learn that Maria did, in fact, remarry. She married a wealthy landowner, a good match arranged by her father, and she has several children. She got what she wanted. Her life is complete. The news doesn't bring a sting of jealousy or regret. It brings closure. Her story has its ending, and it no longer has anything to do with yours. There's a curious historical phenomenon known as spiteful impotence, where a man, out of anger or resentment towards his wife, would deliberately refuse to consummate the marriage. In some rare court cases, this was even used as a defense by the wife that the husband's failure was not due to inability but to malice. Looking back, you wonder if some small, stubborn part of you, crushed under the weight of expectation in your first marriage, had simply refused. It's a question you can never answer, a psychological knot that the legal system could never entangle. Your new life flourishes. The bakery prospers under your joint efforts. Your carpentry work is sought after. You are no longer the quiet stranger in town. You are Master Carpenter. You are Annalise's husband. You are Thomas and Delisa's father. You have a place. You have a name, one that you have built yourself, not one that was given to you. A year after your marriage, Annalise comes to you one evening, her eyes shining. She takes your hand and places it on her belly. You feel a slight, gentle swelling. You are to be a father again, she whispers. In that moment, the last ghost of the past is finally, utterly banished. The verdict of the court, the shame of the trial, the brand of impotent, it all dissolves into nothingness. Here is the ultimate, undeniable proof, not for a court, but for yourself. Here is a new beginning, a new life growing out of the ruins of the old one. The man who was once lost has, against all odds, found his way home. Decades slide by, as smooth and relentless as a river. Your hair turns the color of ash, then of snow. Your hands, once strong and steady, are now gnarled with arthritis, a road map of a life spent working with wooden dough. You are an old man. The town has grown around you. The children you knew are now adults with children of their own. Your stepson, Thomas, is a man grown, a carpenter with a skill that surpasses your own. Your stepdaughter, Elise, is married to the blacksmith's son, and your own child, a daughter named Anna, is the light of your life, now a young woman with her mother's kind eyes and your quiet strength. The bakery is in Thomas's hands now, though Annalise still oversees the books, her mind as sharp as ever. You spend your days in your workshop, no longer building heavy furniture, but carving small, intricate things, toys for your grandchildren, a decorative panel for the church, a wooden spoon for your wife's kitchen. You sit on the bench outside your workshop one late afternoon, the low sun warm on your face. You watch your grandchildren playing in the street, their shouts and laughter the soundtrack of your old age. You have everything a man could ever wish for: a loving wife, a family that respects you, a place in your community. It is a life of profound and simple grace. And yet, sometimes in the quiet moments, the memory of that other life, that other you, floats to the surface. It feels less like a memory and more like a story you once heard about a stranger. The cold chapel, the stern faces of the judges, the humiliation of the inspections, the desperate, sordid trip to the brothel, it all seems so fantastical, so disconnected from the solid reality of your life now. You find yourself reflecting on the sheer absurdity of it all. Why did it happen? What was the purpose of that elaborate, cruel machine of justice? From the vantage point of old age, you begin to see the logic, however flawed, behind the madness. It was about order. In a world that felt chaotic and uncertain, full of plague, famine, and war, the Church tried to impose a divine order on the most fundamental aspects of human life: birth, marriage, death. Your personal tragedy was a small price to pay for maintaining the integrity of that grand system. The core of it, you realize, was the issue of property and lineage. Marriage was the mechanism by which property was passed down, by which bloodlines were continued. A childless marriage was a loose thread that could unravel the entire social and economic fabric. The question of your potency was never really about your personal happiness or sexual fulfillment. It was about whether you could fulfill your function as a link in the great chain of inheritance. When you failed, the chain was broken, and the system had to remove the broken link and allow the chain to be reforged with a new one. It was a system designed to protect the collective, the community, the institution, at the expense of the individual. You were a sacrifice on the altar of social stability. And the bizarre, contradictory nature of it all, the willingness to entertain witchcraft as a defense, the use of prostitutes for evidence, that was the system's strange, clumsy attempt at flexibility. It was the creaking and groaning of a rigid structure trying to account for the messy, unpredictable nature of human beings. It was an acknowledgement that their perfect, divinely ordered system sometimes collided with a reality it couldn't explain, and so it had to invent bizarre loopholes and workarounds to maintain the illusion of control. Historians centuries from now will debate these very questions. They will call the Impotence trials a fascinating intersection of canon law, folk belief, and early medical theory. They will argue about whether the system was designed to control women or to offer them a rare form of agency. They will analyze the economic drivers and the theological justifications. They will write learned papers and fill books with their conclusions. But they can never know what it felt like. They can't know the cold sweat of fear in that courtroom, the soul-deep shame of the congressus, or the quiet, desperate hope in a sordid brothel. They can't know the simple, profound joy of holding your own child for the first time after being told you never would. You look at your gnarled hands. These hands were once inspected by surgeons and matrons, judged and found wanting. These same hands went on to build a home, to raise a family, to hold a wife's hand for 50 years. The cause saw only a single function, a single moment of failure. They could not see a lifetime. A small hand slips into yours. It's your youngest granddaughter, her face smudged with dirt and jam. "Grandpa," she says. "Mama says it's time for supper." You smile, the deep wrinkles around your eyes crinkling. "Is it now?" you say, allowing her to pull you to your feet. The aches and pains of old age make you groan, but it's a good sound, a sound of a life well lived and a body well used. As you walk towards the warm light of your home, towards the smell of roasting chicken and the welcoming embrace of your family, the last vestiges of the old story fade away. It was a strange, terrible, and absurd journey. But it led you here, and here is more than you ever could have asked for. The court may have written the first chapter of your adult life, but you, with the help of a good woman and a great deal of quiet persistence, got to write all the rest. You are sitting by the hearth. The fire has burned low, a quiet bed of glowing embers casting a warm, red light on the room. Annalise is asleep in her chair opposite you, her breathing soft and regular, a gentle rhythm that has been the background music of your life for half a century. Her face, illuminated by the firelight, is a beautiful map of the years you have shared. Every line tells a story of laughter, worry, and enduring, quiet love. You reach out and gently place your hand over hers. Her skin is thin and soft, like old parchment. This simple, Solid warmth is the most real thing you have ever known. It is the final answer to all the questions the court ever asked. In this quiet moment, you think of the trial, not with anger or shame, but with a kind of distant, philosophical curiosity. You picture the judges, long since turned to dust, and their world of rigid rules and arcane beliefs. It seems like a fable from another age. You've heard whispers of how the world is changing in the big cities to the south. Talk of reason, of science, of the rights of man. A famous writer, some fellow named Voltaire, had apparently written scathing attacks on the very idea of the Congress, as calling it barbaric and absurd. The world, it seems, was slowly catching up to the conclusion you reached in your own heart long ago. The mainstream historical view is that the Enlightenment, with its focus on logic and human dignity, was the death knell for these kinds of invasive, irrational trials. By the 18th century, they had almost entirely disappeared from the legal systems of Europe. You smile faintly. You imagine telling one of your grandsons about it, and the look of sheer disbelief on his face. A trial to prove that with witnesses. It's the stuff of a madman's dream. You recall a vast, bizarre story you heard from a well-traveled merchant years ago about a famous case in France involving a nobleman, the Marquis de Langlois. He too was subjected to a Congress assent. According to the story, he actually succeeded, but his wife, determined to get her annulment, argued to the court that while the act had occurred, it was too quick and improper to count as a true consummation. And the legal arguments descended into a farcical debate about the required duration and quality of the act. The case became a laughingstock and helped discredit the entire procedure. It was the ultimate proof that the system was not just cruel, but utterly hopelessly foolish. So why did it last so long? That is the question you still ponder on nights like this. Historians will forever debate this. Was it a genuine, if profoundly misguided, attempt to impose divine order and protect the sanctity of bloodlines and inheritance in a chaotic world? Or was it, more simply, a tool of power, a way for a patriarchal system to control property, to control women by giving them this one terrible escape route, and to enforce a rigid definition of what it meant to be a man? Perhaps it was all of those things at once. The truth, like the embers in the fire, is complex and glowing with many different shades of light and shadow. Annalise stirs in her sleep, her fingers tightening around yours. You look at her beloved face, and the great, complex questions of history dissolve into irrelevance. The verdicts of men and the debates of scholars mean nothing here, in the quiet truth of this room. The only judgment that ever mattered was the one delivered in a warm kitchen, by a woman with flour on her hands and kindness in her eyes. The only proof that ever counted is the weight of her hand in yours, the shared breath in the quiet house, the legacy of love and life you built together out of the ashes of a ruin. The last ember in the hearth winks out, leaving the room in a soft, peaceful darkness, illuminated only by the faint moonlight from the window. You close your eyes, your heart full not of memories of a trial, but of gratitude for a life. You are home. And now, the story is over. The fire has turned to ash, and the house is quiet, breathing softly around you. You can let the details of the trial, the faces of the judges, the coldness of the stone chapel, you can let it all drift away now, like smoke rising from a chimney, thinning into the vast, dark sky until it is gone completely. The journey was long, and at times it was hard. But it has brought you here to this place of warmth and stillness. Feel the comfortable weight of the blanket over you, the gentle support of the pillow beneath your head. The noise of the world, the arguments and accusations, have all faded into a deep and profound silence. All that is left is the quiet truth of this room, the gentle rhythm of your own breathing, in and out. There are no more verdicts to be heard, no more trials to endure. There is only this peaceful moment, suspended in the soft glow of moonlight. You are safe. You are at rest. Allow your mind to become as still as the sleeping house, as dark and as peaceful as the night sky outside. Let go of the day, let go of the story, and ease gently, gently into your own quiet dreams. The end of the article. Good night.